afternoon and good evening to the rest of you. We are back for another episode of Bitcoin Magazine Live. It is I, your host Q, coming to you yet again from my mother's basement. I'm joined by my co-host P, coming from God knows where, and we are joined by the CEO and founder of ECI Developments, Mike Cobb. Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Q. Nice to be with you all today.
Good to have you.
Thank you very much for joining us, Mike. And for those who are not familiar with, to give a little bit of background on ECI, your work is rooted in real estate down in Zante in particular, correct? Talk to us a little bit about the work you're doing there.
Yeah, sure. Well, we started our company 26 years ago, so we've been around quite a while. We actually got our start in Belize. We also work in Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. But most recently, yes, in Zante, in El Salvador. And the thing that's really kind of exciting for us is the ability to build a physical community for what has largely been an online community or a remote community, right? And so it really fits in well with who we are as a company and what we've been doing for so many years to now be able to do it for the Bitcoin community in El Salvador. So yeah, that's the latest and newest, and it's very, very exciting.
Talk to us first before we dive deep into Zante and all of that work. Yeah. How you first came to learn about Bitcoin? When was it, and what was your initial sort of reaction to Bitcoin?
Sure. Well, I was speaking at a conference in Belize back in late 2014, 2015, somewhere along there. And one of the speakers was someone I'd seen around at some of the other conferences that I speak at, Paul Rosenberg. And I don't know if you know Paul or not, but he's been in the space for a long time. He gave a presentation about Bitcoin and the blockchain and digital security. That's his specialty, is digital security. And he really encouraged me to buy some Bitcoin back in 2015. And sadly, I was way too busy and had a million things going on and did not, of course. That's the story many of us can tell. But that was my first exposure to it. And by the way, I love the concept. I thought, oh, this is awesome. Talk about something that's, it's decentralized. It pulls power away from, national governments and federal governments to control monetary policy, right? And it really provides a broad base of monetary exchange, right? I got it. I mean, that was the basis of his presentation, right? Then there was the whole crypto and security side of it and the privacy side of it too. So it all made sense to me. Sad I didn't, follow his advice and pick up some at the time, but it put it on my radar screen. And then 2-3 years later, sometime in 2017, somebody approached our company and said, hey, would you be willing to take Bitcoin for one of your teak? We're also in the agricultural space. We've done a lot of teak plantations over the years. I planted a teak plantation in Panama back in 1999. And those trees are now, 23 years old. But we were approached by somebody who was interested in owning a part of the plantation, asked if we would take Bitcoin. And this was, I think, 2017. And we looked at it and we talked about it briefly internally. We said, yeah, we'll take Bitcoin. So we did. It was a very small transaction. It was, $6,000-$7,000. It wasn't a big transaction, but we took it in Bitcoin, and sadly, we did not keep it again. And then that's sort of the nature. By the way, one of the things I'm most excited about El Salvador is that it is a legal tender in that country, whereas everywhere else I work, when I get Bitcoin, I can't spend that Bitcoin on concrete blocks, steel, windows, doors. We build houses, we build condominiums, right? So we have to take the Bitcoin and we have to turn it into dollars for the most part. We keep a small percentage now, but we have to turn the biggest chunk of it into dollars so we can pay our suppliers. The nice thing about El Salvador is that will we actually be able to take that Bitcoin and use it in our transactional contracts with our contractors and with our suppliers in El Salvador, and we won't have to convert it out of Bitcoin. But yeah, that was our first transaction, 2017 for a teak parcel. Yeah.
Could you maybe share a little bit of what the pros and cons your team came up with for that initial transaction? What were some of the people who were against Bitcoin really saying in their argument for why they shouldn't, or why you shouldn't accept Bitcoin as payment here?
Q, let me say that I don't think there was anyone in our organization that was against taking the Bitcoin. The only challenge was how we were going to take it. We didn't have a wallet, right? I mean, there were just what I'm going to call just administrative, clerical kinds of challenges to taking the Bitcoin. I think we were all on board with it. The conversations internally were more of the, how are we going to do it? So we had to set up a wallet, right? And we didn't have one. And for a company to set up a wallet, especially in 2017, it was very, very challenging. And so what we did was we actually set up a personal wallet to take that first transaction, which isn't a great corporate thing because obviously you want to keep corporate and private separate, from individuals. But we set up a private individual wallet. We took that transaction and we moved those funds from the wallet, from the cash into the company at that point. But it really, the thing that we're on the leading edge. I mean, we started working in Belize 26 years ago, right? We've worked in Nicaragua for 22 years. We're on the front edge. We're a very adventurous company. And so taking Bitcoin wasn't really a stretch for us, philosophically or at a corporate level at all. It was just an administrative function of, how do we do it? And we've since set up a corporate wallet that took some time. Obviously, the KYC, know your client, the whole anti-money laundering, and then the underlying beneficial owner, ultimate beneficial owner. I mean, those are the kinds of things that come into play. And the compliance paperwork is complicated when you're a company because you're not just an individual. For an individual to fill out that paperwork is pretty easy. But for a company to do it, it's more complicated. It's more cumbersome. We worked through those challenges, and we now have a wallet. But yeah, we were excited. We wanted to take the Bitcoin, and to really get that first Bitcoin transaction in house, and we did, and a lot more have followed since.
Have you found, like, you're talking about this transaction that happened in 2017, 2018. In that time, I think the entire Bitcoin ecosystem has done a really good job of, I think, increasing both its exposure as well as product offerings for the less technical people like myself. Have you guys shifted that sort of wallet approach? Has it become easier over time with these new offerings, or are you still using sort of the original wallet that you guys have used?
Yeah, good question. We as quickly as we could. I think it was actually 20. It took us another couple years, so it was 2020 before we actually were able to set up a corporate wallet, which we did with Coinbase, and we've tied it to a Citizens bank account, so it's a direct tie into our corporate bank account as well. And it's been working really well for large transactions, real estate transactions. The one place where we're shifting now, I think, to BitPay. I think that's right. I'm not 100% sure, but we're shifting out of Coinbase exclusively because we want the ability to do smaller transactions. We have a hospitality business as well, right? We develop homes, condominiums, resort communities. And for some people who want to live there, it's great. And we do have a lot of full-time residents living at our resort communities. But when people aren't there, or for some of the folks who are investors, they want to be able to rent their properties. And so one of the things we had to have and we had to really develop was this hospitality piece to be able to take smaller transactions without, what I'm going to call the enhanced due diligence. Like if somebody's buying a $150,000 condo or home, there's a lot of due diligence that goes into that. If somebody's going to, come stay 3 nights for, $350, it's a different level of due diligence. And so we wanted the ability to have sort of a bifurcation administratively, the big transactions that require a lot of due diligence, and then the smaller transactions that require, less due diligence. And so I think we've been able to figure that out. But in both cases now, they are ECI wallets, not personal wallets.
So talk to us now a little bit. We've talked about this transaction in Belize and the due diligence that you and your team sort of put into when exploring these opportunities for both potential renters or potential buyers, as well as those investors you guys work on behalf of. Talk to us about how you guys saw the opportunity in Zante. This is ground zero for how Bitcoin citadels look, operate, how Bitcoin has risen up. When did you guys start getting involved there?
Well, yeah, it was almost a year ago. It was last June when there was the Bitcoin conference in Miami. It was over in the Arts District, and it was we were speaking. I was speaking in one of the venues. We also had a booth in the exhibit hall, and it was on the second day of the conference. And in fact, I mean, we've kind of kept track of what's going on. Obviously, we're in that community, and so we kind of heard the rumblings. Yeah, El Salvador is going to do something, and and I hate to say it, I hate to say I'm cynical, but I hear a lot of like something's going to happen. Well, when it happens, let me know, right? And so I pay attention to the rumbles, but when it really happens, that's ultimately what we're going to act on, right? So we kind of heard the rumblings that Bukele was going to do some stuff in El Salvador. We're keeping our ear to the ground on that. And then on the second day of the conference, we had our booth. We were swamped, by the way. And it's interesting because I don't get it, Q. I really don't understand why there aren't more realtor, developer, folks like us in this space. I think we were the one of two exhibitors at that conference last year in the real estate space. There was a Miami developer with a condo project there in Miami, and then there was us, and we're all offshore, right? We do everything in Central and South America. And by the way, same thing is true this year. I think there were two, maybe three exhibitors. There was the Bitcoin Towers guys, there was us, and then I think one more real estate group at the conference. But but it is what it is, right? But last year in June, we were there. We were swamped. We had people stacked up at the booth, solid 3 days. And I'm out in front of the booth, and this guy comes up and introduces himself. He says his name is Mike Peterson, and I didn't know who Mike Peterson was, right? I've been listening to some rumblings on the ground about El Salvador, but I hadn't really dug in very much on it. And so this guy introduces himself, Mike Peterson, and he's in the food business, and he's got this piece of property in El Zante, Bitcoin Beach. And I say, yeah, right. He says, would you guys be interested in talking about a joint venture? I said, well, sure. And again, I don't know who he is at this point. It's just some guy named Mike in the food business in San Diego. And I say, okay, Mike, because I get approached by this a lot, right? I mean, at conferences, probably at every conference, one or two people comes up to me and says, hey, I've got this piece of property. Would you be interested in doing something with me? And so the first thing I say is, probably. Let's see. Let's look at it. Send me a copy of your title. That's the first thing. Lots of people say they have property. They don't, right? Send me a copy of your title. Send me a map. Send me 4 or 5 pictures, and send me any kind of write-up, or if you have topography or anything on the property. So that's Mike and I, we talk for a little bit, and it's a nice casual conversation. He goes away, and okay, whatever. I forget about it. On Tuesday, I start getting emails into my inbox with title, pictures, map, survey, all that kind of stuff. I think, all right, he's real. So whatever, we go back and forth, and over the course of maybe 4 or 5 weeks, we kind of figure out a letter of intent, right? Like what's it going to look like to put a deal together? And so I hand it off to my business partner, who's an attorney. And the next morning, I get a call. This is 5 weeks into it. I get a call from his secretary, Mary, and Mary goes, hey, Mike, do you know who you're working with in El Salvador? And I'm thinking, well, all right. I don't know where this is going. She goes, no. I say, oh, yeah, Mike Peterson. She goes, yeah, but do you know who he is? I said, I don't know. Some guy has a food business. She goes, he's the godfather of Bitcoin in El Salvador. And I'm like, really? She goes, yeah. I just sent you a link to the Forbes article. And so, okay. So a couple things about that. I really, really appreciated the fact that he didn't brag on himself. He didn't say, who he was, other than this guy, Mike, has a piece of land. And he followed through, and we worked out a whole deal, and it never even came up what his real foundational piece of bringing Bitcoin into the country of El Salvador was, and how he did it. And I, obviously, I called him up a few minutes later. I'm like, hey, man, why didn't you tell me any of this stuff, right? And anyway, we laughed. We had a good conversation, but it's been a real pleasure getting to know Mike and Brittany, his wife, and Jorge and Roman and the whole team down there, that whole, Bitcoin Beach community, and what they've done with Hope House over the years. These are exactly the kind of people that we want to do business with. And it was really serendipity. Honestly, Q, it wasn't something I tried to do. Mike sought us out as a potential development partner for his property. So that's really how it came about.
I'm assuming you have made your way down and personally like seen El Zante.
Yes.
What was the experience like the first trip down?
Well, okay. So I lived in Nicaragua. I moved to Nicaragua in 2002 with my wife and my 2-year-old daughter. And we went there to get our Grand Pacifica community started. And we thought we would be there for 2, 3, maybe 4 years. That's how I sold it to my wife. I'm like, honey, we got to go to Nicaragua for a few years, get this project started. And what was funny was, about 3.5 years into it, she and I went out to dinner, and we'd kept our home in the US where I am today. And we kept our home in the States. And because we thought we were coming back in a couple of years, and it rented out, and we're in a little college town, so it's good. And we went out to dinner, and we'd had another daughter came along. So now we had 2 daughters, and we went out to dinner, and we made the list. We just wrote down every single reason we could think of to stay in Nicaragua versus go back to the US. And it was very quickly apparent, like, we were staying in Nicaragua, but we kept making the list, all the things we missed back home, and weren't many, and all the good things for either. And we ended up staying in Nicaragua, 11 more years. We were in Nicaragua a total of 14 years. And so, and I'd been to El Salvador a few times over the years. In fact, I was invited there about 5 years ago as a guest of the government to come look at developing there. So I'd already kind of put a brain power to it. I'd met with some of their tourism and housing folks. So I had some, some background already when I went to El Zante for my first trip, which was, I guess, July or August of last year. I don't remember at this point, but prior to the big day of September 7th. But anyway, my impressions when I got there was that it was it reminded me a lot of Nicaragua. It was, it's the same kind of climate. It's really the same ocean, 100 miles north, right? The same climate, the same geography, about 100 miles north. The thing that El Zante has and El Salvador has is a much larger economy. The GDP is higher. You can just tell. It's not nearly as poor as a country like Nicaragua, but in so many ways it's familiar. The Spanish they speak is very similar. The accent was familiar to me. I learned to speak Spanish a little bit in Nicaragua, but for me, it kind of felt like home. Again, having lived in Nicaragua for 14 years, when I go back to Nicaragua now, and I'm there, 5, 6 times a year, I feel at home. I drop right in. I'm at home. And when I went to El Zante, I really felt at home again. It's a small town on the ocean. But it's vibrant. It's a small town, but it's vibrant. And I think that really has to do, obviously, with what's happening in Bitcoin, and also what Mike and Jorge and Ramon and the team have done there to bring vitality and vibrancy to a struggling community, certainly during the COVID period. But again, what happened with Bitcoin during the COVID time really kept that community vibrant in a way that I think other communities, a few miles up and down the coast, the whole coast kind of thing, really didn't get the benefit of that, and didn't thrive as much as El Zante did during a really, really tough period, right?
I love that. It's also so incredible to hear just like your experience just all throughout Central America. I'm curious, just what is, of any place you visited in that region of the world, what is your favorite?
Nicaragua is my favorite because I lived there. I raised some daughters. I got a ton of memories. My little girls, doing, rescuing sea turtles and baby turtle releases. You are up in the jungle, up in the cloud forest. Just tons of great memories that we as a family built in Nicaragua. So, it's just so near and dear to my heart. But certainly, believe it or not, El Salvador, but I'm going to be very specific, not the country, but El Zante as a town grabs my heart in a powerful way. And so it probably comes in number 2. And the other thing that from a core company perspective, right, from a whole, like, top down, looking down at the country of El Salvador, just the fact that here's a leader who said, you know what, we're going to make Bitcoin legal tender. I mean, wow. Let me just be just like, wow. I mean, flabbergasted. I mean, again, you hear the rumblings, you hope it happens, but to actually see somebody do it. So when that kind of thing happens at a country level, and then you've got this little fun, funky, surf town, beach town, that the two layer together pretty nice. I really like El Zante. And, and the other thing is the people, I've become friends with Jorge. I've become friends with Ramon, obviously Mike and Brittany. And so when you make the personal connections with people, then it changes that dynamic again, significantly as well. I'm a fan of Panama. I like Panama. I've been spending a lot of time there since the mid 90s, speaking at conferences. Obviously, our teak plantation, we're developing a couple resort communities there too. It has a similar feel to, again, the Pacific side of Central America kind of has a pretty common geography or geographic feel to it. But that small town, I grew up in a small town in Northwest Pennsylvania, and small towns really do it for me. And by the way, sometimes people laugh because I always say that, Nicaragua is a small town. I mean, no matter where you go in the country, you see people, you see somebody, right? So Nicaragua is a small town, but El Zante is truly a small, but vibrant, fun place with yeah.
So Mike, as I've very well established, and everyone who tunes into the show knows, do not own property. I live in my mother's basement. Okay. So I'm going to ask you some questions, but you're going to have to talk to me like I'm a kid who lives in his mom's basement.
All right.
Walk us through the differences, or at least maybe paint the picture, because most of our audience does live in North America and the United States, or just in Western developed countries. What are sort of the steps it takes for you guys to plan and execute building these type of properties in more developed parts of the world versus in Central America, and then more specifically in El Zante?
Yeah. I don't know that the process, like the actual process, is very different, but there are certain pieces of the process that are accentuated in North America that may be less so in Central America, and vice versa. And so I'll just give one example. Let me back up and say that, there's a belief, I would say a bad belief. I don't know. I mean, that's a moral judgment, but let me make it. There's a bad belief that the way to do business in Latin America is to bribe and pay people off, right? I mean, it's sort of the way things are done kind of thing. We've been in business 26 years as a development company. We've never paid a bribe in 26 years. And it's made our job more difficult at times because, it is somewhat expected. Maybe it's more prevalent than it is in the US, although I'm pretty sure it probably happens up here too, right? But the point is that, we've taken a stance. We're not gonna pay bribes. We're not gonna pay people off. And where that impacts your business. So in the US, in the development business, the first thing you do is entitlements or permitting, right? Generally called permitting. And so let's get through you own the property, you find a partner. That part's kind of similar, right? Now, what's the next thing you do? Well, you begin a permitting process. You begin the entitlement of the property. You get, you do, if there are zoning issues, if there are always environmental impacts, there are construction permits, and all the engineering to make sure that you're doing it right. That process in the US tends to be fairly cumbersome and fairly long. In a state like California, that can take a decade. I mean, literally, you can own a property and not be doing anything to it for a decade. In Central and South America, that process is fairly compressed, right? It's a lot shorter. It might be 12 to 18 months if you do it right. And we do it right. I mean, we want to be responsible corporate citizens. We are responsible corporate citizens, but when you do it, you've got, you hire the engineering companies, you build out, your plans, you submit those plans, you get your environmental permits, you get your construction permits, then you can actually move to construction. Well, that process takes shorter in Central America, longer in the US. However, when you get to the point of getting started, then it flip-flops. Actually, the actual construction of, say, infrastructure, roads, water, sewer, telecommunications, all of those kinds of things, homes in any kind of big quantity, that happens a lot faster in the US because you've got a lot more machinery, you've got a lot more sophistication in the process, right? Because it is a process. All of that's a process. Whereas it drags out more in Central America because you might not have the equipment, the process, the systems, the contractors, the ability to outsource a lot of things just simply doesn't exist. So you got to home grow a lot of things, right? So that takes longer, whereas it takes shorter in the U.S. But that's about it. It's kind of a flip flop. I think on the big spectrum, I would say that probably, and it's state by state. Some states are faster than others. California is probably the worst. You start a project, you might not be selling or building houses for 5 to 10 to 12 years. Other states it might be 2-3 years. And so I think Central America kind of fits in there. 2-3 years from acquisition of a property to the delivery of the first homes. And so that's kind of what we're looking at in El Zante. I mean, we put our agreement together with Mike last summer, last fall. We had our zoning changes done, which was great. We're in the process of working with the engineering firm right now to produce the documents for infrastructure, again, roads, water, sewer, so that we can actually submit for our environmental permit. And once we submit those, the time frame is 6 months to 18 months, right? You don't know, but hopefully we can move things through fairly quickly. Let's call it 9 to 12 months. So it's about a year from right now, Q, before we would actually have product that we could bring to the marketplace, where we could actually say, okay, here's the home, here's how much it costs, here's where it's going to go. And if we start it, 90 days from now, you'll have it in 10 months or whatever, right? So it's really 3 years. I mean, that's the timeline. If you do it right, start to finish, it's about a 3-year window on the front side. And then obviously, once you start building, you build large, and we build large communities, right? We build anything from, maybe, 3-4 dozen homes or condos up to, several thousand addresses. And I think the El Zante project, again, we've proposed, and we don't know yet because we have to get back permits to give us the permission to do this, but we're anticipating somewhere around 200 to 300 addresses on this site, which is a village. I mean, that's really what we do. We build villages. And when you get 200 to 300 addresses and you figure about 1.5 people per address on average, right? You're at about 400 to 500 folks who become part of this village. And that really becomes a community in some neat ways. I mean, it's dynamic. You have enough people to have different neighborhoods or different groupings, right? Different friendship circles and that kind of stuff. But yet, if you want to do something like a concert or get everybody together, you can get a few hundred people together and people can come together and you'll know everybody. At least you'll know them by sight. You might not really know them as friends, but in a village, everybody knows everybody else. And that sense of community is really powerful. And in fact, I'll just tell a quick story. At our Grand Pacifica community last fall, a guy, one of our residents, hit 2 boys, little boys, like a 13, 14-month-old and about a 4-year-old, hit him with his truck that was glare. He didn't see him. He ran over him. And both were in the hospital for a little bit of time. And one with some pretty serious stuff. They're both recovered. But I can tell you that the community rallied around both the family of the kids who got hit and the guy who'd hit him. I mean, he was despondent with grief. I mean, he just, run over a couple little kids, right? So like the community came together and supported both of these folks in ways that was powerful. And it was truly, as a developer, as someone who's, built the physical part of this, right? The old saying, concrete, steel, and lumber make the buildings, but people make the community. And so we did our part with the concrete, steel, and lumber, but the people who were there and the community that was there rallied around these folks. And that's what's really going to be special about what we're doing in El Zante as well. Because look, the one thing that I noticed last year at the June conference, the Bitcoin conference in June in Miami last year, was how electric it was. And I've seen this. I mean, I've been doing this for 26 years, and our business for the first 20 of those years or 23 of those years was mostly retiree and pre-retiree, right? but there's an electricity in the air when you get people together who share common philosophies and common excitement about something, right? And it's largely been this idea of an expat lifestyle, right? So we get the pre-retirees together. They're all happy to be together because now they don't feel like a freak talking about moving to Mexico or moving to Nicaragua of all places, right? Or Belize or wherever, with the people around them, because like everyone else is kind of thinking the same thing, right? When I got to that Bitcoin conference in June, it was quickly apparent, not in the conference room, but obviously in the exhibit hall in the conference room. That's always loud and noisy. Where I noticed it was when we went to that little taco place. I can't remember the name of it now. Great taco place, by the way. There was a line, I don't know, half a mile long, wrapping around the block, and there were people everywhere. The excitement in the line of people waiting to get into that taco stand, it wasn't just my group of two talking with my people, or 3 or 4 people. It was people up and down the line talking and getting to know the people around them. That almost never happens. And I mean, that is excitement. That's electricity. That's tribe. And so for us to be able to build a physical community where folks can get together, the desire, you could just tell the desire to talk to other Bitcoiners was real, and it was happening. I mean, they were getting to know one another standing in this line, right? And to be able to build a place that people can enjoy that whenever they want. If they want to go on vacation, they can enjoy it for a week or 2. If they want to live there part of the year, they can enjoy it part of the year. If they want to become a full-time resident, they can enjoy it year round. That's really special. And of all the things that drives me, it's the delivery of community. Again, I'll do my part. I'll put in the concrete, steel, and lumber, right? That's what I do, right? But when the people come together and create real community, it's special. And this community specifically, the Bitcoin community, is one that doesn't really have a physical place, right? There is no physical place. The one outlier on that may be Puerto Rico. I think, a lot of folks went to Puerto Rico early on that were in the Bitcoin space. They tended to be the whales or the mega whales, but that's okay too. I mean, like, hey, everybody needs a community, but this particular community, I think, will be much more affordable, right? We hope to have product in the $200,000 range, maybe even sub 200 for some small studio stuff, because we want to make it as inclusive as possible. We want to get people who are part of the tribe, who are part of the Bitcoin community, and give them the ability to have ownership, to be able to enjoy, the society of other people around them in this village. So, Q, I went off on a tangent. I have no idea what the question was. I hope I answered it. I don't even know. I'm sorry.
I'm being completely honest with you, Mike. I don't remember what the question was, but I enjoyed the story.
I just want to jump in there. It's super interesting to me. One of the questions that I was going to ask is, who is the intended audience for this community? And I think you started to answer it, but what type of Bitcoiners are going to be, moving into this space? What are the types of features that may be unique to this space versus just, the types of developments that you built in the past?
Sure. Well, let me say that I think it's the people that will make it distinct, right? And so again, to the extent that let me answer it a little bit more specifically, and then we'll come back to the general. One of the things that we've done and we're doing now is we've built tiny homes, anything from and the square footages are misleading, right? So there's sort of the air, I'm going to call it, internal, quote unquote, air conditioned space, 350 to say 500 square feet, right? But in the tropics, which, El Zante is, most people live outside. When we lived in Nicaragua, literally, we got up in the morning, we opened up our doors, we had sliding glass doors, we opened them up. We didn't have screens, right? I mean, we just literally opened up to the world, to the outside, and we lived indoors, outdoors, most of the time on our patio. There's a nice breeze. And so you don't need a lot of inside space, and so say 400 to 500 square feet, because then if you have rooftop and you have some patio space on the first floor, that's covered is the key, right? The sun is strong, the sun is hot, right? And in the rainy season, it rains, right? But so if you can cover your patio space and have a rooftop that's also covered, now all of a sudden, say 400 square feet actually turns into about 1,200 square feet of livable space. The really cool thing is you're only paying for the construction of about 400 hard, right? And the roofs cost a little bit of money too, but they don't cost what it costs to actually build walls and windows and, and all that kind of stuff, right? So you're really paying for 400 square feet, but you're getting livable space of, say, 1,000, 1,200 square feet on a smaller, tiny home. Well, when you do that, you bring the product into the realm of affordability for folks. And again, the reason I can't really talk, so at Grand Pacifica, let me talk specifically there because I have numbers and I could talk about them, right? We know what it costs to build in Nicaragua. We know what the infrastructure cost is per address because we've already built it. We've paved the road, we ran the water, right? Those kinds of things. So we actually have homes that start about $135,000, about 150 yards from the ocean at Grand Pacifica, right? So somebody comes along and we actually can offer up to 80% financing. So somebody comes along with, say, $25,000, $30,000, in upfront deposit, they can actually own one of these tiny homes and begin to use it and enjoy it, and so it brings ownership of property, not just overseas, but in this case overseas, to a realm of affordability that most folks don't imagine is possible. And what we're seeing, P, is we're getting people who are truly digital nomads. I mean, it's funny, that word, that word has been thrown around a lot, but our company is 26 years old. We have been a remote digital nomad company for 26 years because we've worked in multiple countries of the region. And so, if our marketing department is in Belize, they're still doing work for our Nicaragua and our Costa Rica and our Panama company. So we've been crisscrossing this remoteness for the entire existence of our company. And so the concept was very familiar. And so it wasn't a stretch at all. In fact, it was just this natural progression when we started to look at tiny homes that we could say, you know what, these are perfect for people who want to work remotely. And so we brought it into the realm of affordability. The thing that got really exciting is when COVID and the lockdowns and all the stuff from COVID happened. This is big, and actually there's a convergence of things happening right now that I remain optimistic, but it's so big it could be scary. Think about this: for the first time in human history, work and the location of work have been decoupled. Right? First time in human. When we were hunter-gatherers, we had to be there to gather or hunt. And when we went agriculture, we had to be there to till the fields. When we moved from agricultural to industrial, we had to show up and run the machines, right? Starting in the 70s, you had guys like Alvin Toffler with Future Shock and John Nesbitt with Megatrends. These guys in the 70s, early 80s were talking about this word post-industrial society, right? But 80s came, the 90s came, 2010, right? It wasn't until last year that for the first time, people actually could like take advantage of this technological reality, which let them work from home. It was insane, right? People got in their cars and drove 2 hours to work on their computer or talk on the phone, right? We don't need to do that. We know we don't need to do that. But the bosses, the companies and the management were like, no way. Because if I let you work from home, I'm pretty sure that you're going to watch Game of Thrones all day or whatever they thought you were going to do, right? And the employees were afraid to ask, because if I ask if I can work from home, well, I'm probably not going to get that promotion that I thought I was going to get, right? So we have this decoupling of work and the location of work. First time in human history, we really have transitioned into this, post-industrial society for many people, not for all people, but for many, many people, right? That is huge. Now we're going to layer on this idea of world money, right? A truly international currency that's not controlled by any federal government. These two things together, I think they're an exponential. I truly believe this is an exponential. It's not an additive quality. I think it's it's not 3 + 3, it's 3 × 3, right? And it's scary in some great ways, and it's scary in some scary ways, because there are a lot of entrenched interests that don't want either of these things to really go as far as they're probably going to go, right? I mean, the cat's out of the bag. Like, there's no putting this cat back in the bag in either case, right? There's not. But how it goes and how and the reaction of the entrenched interests who are strong and powerful, and in many cases, federal governments, right? National governments who have the monopoly on violence, right? That's legal violence, right? That's the statement. I'm a fairly libertarian guy, and I don't mind calling it like I see it, right? But national governments have the monopoly on legal violence, right? And those big governments are entrenched interests in many ways. Corporations, likewise, are big entrenched interests. So this convergence of these two things is powerful. And for the consumer, for the person who I believe is into Bitcoin, who's a Bitcoiner, right? And understands that the power of that for their life and the control of their financial future, right? This is a big deal. And then there's the second element, and I give a lot of presentations about second residencies, right? I talk about this thing called a plan B, because, and in fact, this is the presentation I've given at the Bitcoin conference now a couple times. And it's this notion that Bitcoin gives us financial freedom, or it's a big part of financial. It's not total, but it's a big part of financial freedom. If we have Bitcoin, we've got a lot of the elements of financial freedom in our hands. But what we don't have, and the mistake that I think people make, the misleap, the false leap, is that because I have financial independence and I have financial freedom, I also have personal freedom. But that's not the case. That's not the case, because you're still, if you don't have a second residency outside your home country, you're a prisoner of your country, right? And so having this second residency, having a way to be legally allowed to live outside your home country for as long as you want, this is really important for personal freedom. And so this convergence of financial freedom and personal freedom, and this decoupling of work and the location of work, when you put those together, somebody who says, you know what, I have Bitcoin, I want to work, I can work from anywhere, I love to surf, I want to live where it's warm, whatever their reason is or reasons are, right? I love pupusas, I don't care, I mean, whatever it is, right? I want to live in El Salvador, right? So you've got the ability to work from anywhere, you've got the desire to live in El Salvador, you've got the affordability. Again, not everybody can afford it, but when you can put, say, $30,000 down, 30, 50,000, I don't know, pick a number, $30,000 to $50,000 down, you've brought property ownership overseas into a realm of affordability for a lot more people than if your property start at 250 and go up, right? That's a big difference too. And so when you put all those factors together, what I believe, and I'm finally getting to your answer, Pete, I'm going to get here right now. The people who I see becoming the core resident group, the core of the village at El Zante for what we're doing there, are going to be remote workers, right? People who have the ability, whether they choose to do it there or not. They're people who largely have the ability to do that. They have some measure of financial freedom because they're into Bitcoin, and they want to be around other people who share that sense of adventure, but also the common interests in working remotely and being in a fun place together. That's really, I would say, the foundation of it. Yes, will there be product that's more than 150, 200? I'm sure there will be. I mean, we plan to have product kind of at all price stratas. But again, as part of a village, that works too. I mean, you get when you've got lots of different levels of income and wealth, not just income, but lots of different wealth levels. And you see that at the conference, I mean, there are whales walking around, and there are people with 3 Satoshis in their pocket, right? I mean, they're still talking about the same stuff. They're enjoying the company of one another, right? Because it's about a philosophy. It's about a way of life when you move it to a village, right? But it's about a philosophy at a conference or something like that. But when you move it to a location, like, it actually becomes a way of life, and your level of wealth and your level of income are a lot less important in that. But we want to make it, as inclusive as possible. And then the other thing that's happening now is you've got companies like Salt and Milo and some others. I think Abro's coming out with a product. I don't know. It's kind of evolving, right? Who are giving people mortgages with their Bitcoin as collateral. And we're just scratching the surface of companies that are going to do that. None of them right now do it offshore. It's all domestic. And so the next evolution, I think, we've engaged each of those three companies that I just mentioned to say, hey, like, hello, let's try to do it overseas too. Let's not just lock it into a US product. And we're getting some people listening. So hopefully that'll change the financing dynamic for folks with Bitcoin that they want to pledge as collateral as well. So again, lots of different levers that people can pull to make this work for them.
Got it. That makes sense. One of the panels that I was super excited to build out at the conference was there was one that was focused specifically on Bitcoin mortgages. I think that's a really interesting, and really important developing system.
It is. Well, Pete, if you've got any influence with those guys, beat them up real good and tell them to take a look at doing some stuff offshore too. Okay.
All right. Yeah, I didn't realize that they're only US based. That's super interesting.
Yep. And I understand, because I think most of them are actually looking at cross collateralizing. They collateralize with the Bitcoin, but they also collateralize the property.
Yep.
And so I get it. I mean, how do you collateralize a house in El Salvador? Right.
Got it, yeah.
But at a certain amount of Bitcoin, right, you don't need that cross collateralization anymore. But although it's not hard to collateralize a house in El Salvador either, actually. So again, it could be their model with offshore, or it could just be enhanced Bitcoin collateral to do it. But yeah.
The people that were on that panel were Ledin, Hoseki, and Milo. And I think they're right that they only offer US based mortgages.
So far,
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, do you mind talking a little bit, because I know at the very beginning you touched on the fact that the very first Bitcoin transaction was seemingly, like, for all intents and purposes, an all cash transaction, and then you guys moved on from that, except the cash in this instance was Bitcoin. Talk to us about the hurdles of accepting Bitcoin, both as a payment for cash versus using it as collateral to then take some more payments down the line, and what risk assessment you have to take as a result of that.
Yeah, sure. Again, the issue for us, we actually have, I'll make up a number, and we have about 150 employees of the company, direct employees, outside contractors, and construction people too, but about 150 people kind of in the company. And I think 15 or 20 of them are actually taking Bitcoin as part of their compensation program, which is tremendous. And so, we have a group of people in the company that are obviously very enthusiastic about Bitcoin and are taking part of their compensation in it. But outside of that, there's nothing we can do. That's not true. We paid our engineering firm. That's not true. We paid our engineering firm in El Salvador in Bitcoin. So that was maybe our first third-party transaction that occurred in Bitcoin, which is exciting. And that happened late last year, I think early this year. I don't remember. Anyway, but outside of that one specific example, there is nothing we can do with our Bitcoin other than keep it, which we are keeping some of it, other than just, pay the employees who want to get paid in Bitcoin. The challenge for us as a company, again, is that, we have to buy concrete, steel, lumber, windows, doors, everything it takes to build, homes and condominiums. And so we have to convert the biggest part of our Bitcoin into fiat. And we do. And I'm happy to share this. We're a very transparent company. Our profit margin on our product is somewhere between 21 and 23%. That's our profit margin, 21 to 23%. So right now we have a standing order with Coinbase that when the money comes in, 95% of it gets converted to dollars immediately, and 5% stays in Bitcoin. And that 5% that stays represents about 25% of our profit. right? That's 25% of our profit. So we're willing to keep 25% of our profit there. The rest of it, we move into dollars so that we can transact for all the stuff we need. Again, in El Salvador, it's going to be very, very different because we're going to have the ability to accept the Bitcoin from a client and immediately pay our concrete supplier or our steel supplier or our road builder or whatever it is, or our house builder, right? Or our employees, right? And so that changes the dynamic of what we can do and what we will do with Bitcoin as we receive it. And there'll probably be people, like if we have to buy stuff from Mexico, which we will. I mean, again, not everything's made in El Salvador, right? So the stuff we have to buy from other places, we're still going to have to convert and pay in fiat. But a bigger chunk of our transactional business will be in Bitcoin in El Salvador. And for us, philosophically, that's really important. Again, I mentioned I'm a libertarian. I love the idea of this, financial independence. And for me, the ability to transact as much as possible in Bitcoin is highly attractive philosophically, right? I love it. I think it's tremendous and I want to do more of it. But I'm also a businessman and I have to be realistic and practical. I can only do it to the extent that I can do it. But I don't know, Q, did that answer the question?
I think to a degree, yeah. I'm
Okay.
curious though, if like accepting Bitcoin or this shift over the last 5 years that your company has taken to really adopting Bitcoin, has that changed any risk calculations when incorporating sort of price fluctuation of Bitcoin, or how does that factor into anything?
Yeah, I mean, a good question. Now, sorry, I missed that on the first go. So, we mentally, I'm physically on paper, not on paper, electronically, whatever. We model our pricing based on a US dollar because pretty much everywhere we work, Central America, even though, some countries have their own currencies, it's still a US dollar based system from a supplier standpoint for all the materials that we need. And the vast majority of our clients are North American. So they'll pay with US dollars. We take Canadian dollars. We take euros. We take francs. I mean, we don't care, pounds. I mean, we've taken many different currencies over the years because for us, whatever that value we're receiving is can be translated, into a dollar equivalent that we can then, make the adjustment on that number, right? But we price our properties at sort of a US dollar equivalent. And so, right. So, the challenge is if you go to a conference saying you're talking about, oh, this tiny home here is 4 Bitcoins, right? Or whatever it is, then the challenge is, okay, well, somebody goes home and they call you up in a week and now it's 4.5 or it's 3.5 or whatever it is, right? So that kind of volatility is challenging. We just sort of, we're pretty upfront. I mean, like, hey, look, we're pricing in US dollar equivalent. And whatever the Bitcoin equivalent is, that's what you need to deliver to us to have ownership of that home or condominium. And I think over time, the volatility of Bitcoin is going to settle down. Again, as it becomes more transactional and the speculators are out of the marketplace, and it really becomes that medium of transaction for people generally, then the volatility will reduce significantly. I don't think it'll never be gone. The dollar moves, right? All currencies move against other currencies, but they move within a much tighter range. And I'm guessing that 5 years from now, Bitcoin will be moving in a much tighter range than it is today.
I'm curious then, Mike, if you can maybe break this down a little bit. Are you saying that you guys will sort of agree upon a price, say Bitcoin at $40,000 a coin USD, and then obviously no real estate deal happens within 24 hours. It takes some time to get all the lawyers and have the money move everywhere. So should the price have a significant move, either downside or upside, is that sort of what you're saying? Like you'll agree to a price on this date, regardless of what the price is on date of execution?
Yeah, although we usually bring it right in because what we actually build to order. We don't actually spec build homes. Oh, that's not true. We do a little bit, but generally 98% of our business is build to order, right? So somebody comes along and says, I want this tiny house, and we work through the paperwork, and let's just call it 150,000, just an easy number, right? And so it's 150. And so on the day we decide to transact, right? Everybody's lined up. We get online, we move whatever that equivalent of 150 in Bitcoin is over to my wallet. Now, if in the next hour or two or next day, Bitcoin moves radically one way or the other, that's me. I own that, right? So once the client has paid the $150,000 equivalent, all risk with the coin is mine, both up and down, right? I mean, it moves both ways. So, and that's why we have a standing order with Coinbase now to take 95% of it and put it into dollars. I can't, I can't risk the volatility. 5%, I'm willing to risk the volatility on that 5, but not the money I need to actually, build their house and run our business, right? I can't put that at volatility risk.
Do you think that, ignoring the shift in volatility, would something like more countries adopting Bitcoin as legal tender start to move that 5% allocation wider, or what factors are you paying attention to in regards to potentially shifting that?
Yeah, I think it's largely the volatility issue and the trading range over time. So I think that's going to flatten. I think we're going to see that range really come down. I think more countries adopting Bitcoin as legal tender means more people transacting, right? And so again, when the Bitcoin comes out of the hand of the speculators who are looking for big gains, right, and into the hands of people who want to transact with it, that and it's a limited supply. Again, I mean, we have a fixed supply. So that, if there's, I guess we're still making, we're still mining some, but not much longer. I mean, we're kind of getting to the end of that, right? As a percentage, we're down to the last, 15% or something, right? So as coins come out of the investor speculative people's hands into the transactional hands, right, that's going to definitely reduce that. The thing that's going to reduce it mostly for us, though, is the fact that in El Salvador, we're going to be able to keep maybe 10 or 15%, because literally we're going to get that coin and we're going to go pay our supplier with it, right? So for us, the ability to keep more means that it becomes more transactional for us. Again, we're not really keeping that 5%. I mean, that's actually more of a philosophical basis for us. Again, we have employees that we pay with it. We anticipate some contractor payments, but we also are pretty, bullish on Bitcoin. So there's a speculative play to that 5% as well. But again, for us to have it be transactional is the most important thing. And again, and Panama, I mean, Panama's, again, rumblings, we're going to look at some legislation, I hope so. Again, if and when they really pull the trigger and make it legislation to make Bitcoin legal tender alongside the US dollar there, that's a big economy, just like El Salvador. I don't know how big the Central African Republic economy is. I don't think it's particularly big. Panama's got a very large US dollar economy. So as more and more large economies do this, the stabilization of that value is going to continue. So
one thing I wanted to just jump in with is, how does the allocation that you're setting up, how does that interact with some of the new systems that are being built out with stable coins like on Taro and things like that? Does that change those parameters at all?
So far, no. We have a couple people in the company that pay attention to that. Gabriella Repetto really is the person on the front lines of keeping track of what's happening in the industry and understanding what those might mean for us internally on our, I guess I'm going to call it our finance side, right? Because that's really where that crypto piece lays. But she's not brought anything to my attention at this point that would indicate any of that has changed our allocations at this point.
Got it.
Can I just add one thing just real quick?
Please.
And I touched on it a minute ago, and I just want to circle back. And that's this notion of the difference between North America and Latin America. We talked about the difference in entitlements and time to build and things like that. But there's another piece that's really consumer centric. And that's this idea of moving from what I call the land of seller beware, right, to the land of buyer beware. And in the US, we've got all kinds of consumer protection agencies. We've got lots of regulations. We've got lemon laws. I mean, just on and on and on, where we really are consumers within a very protective bubble, right? It's hard for somebody to screw us, right? It's not impossible. I mean, Enron happened, but for the most part, it's hard for a company to really kind of give it to us bad. When we go south of the border, we leave the land of consumer protection. We leave the land of seller beware, and we enter the land of buyer beware. And what this means really is that we have to change how we think. And that's not easy, by the way. And there are two tenets to this. There are two tenets. We have to forget what we think we know first. Like, we bring assumptions with us, right? We like, oh, it's going to be this way, right? And I give one example, and this is it's a very visual example, so this isn't so great. But when we buy a property anywhere, we in North America, we assume that we have hot and cold running water in all the bathrooms, right? We just assume we have it. And when we buy property overseas, that assumption is very dangerous. And I have this picture of a condo in Costa Rica that was beautiful. I mean, $1 million view. I mean, I think it was a 4th or 5th story condo, looks out over the Pacific Ocean, nice bathrooms, nice faucets, $150 Moen or Delta faucets up on top, mirrors, lighting, the bathrooms, beautiful, right? Two taps, one on the left, one on the right, cold and hot. And you turn one on, water comes out. You turn the other one on, water comes out. But unless you get rid of this assumption, right, that you're going to have hot water, and get down on your hands and knees and look under the sink, what you see when you look under the sink is a cold water pipe coming out with a Y splitter so that there's water to both taps, but it's cold in both cases. Interesting. And the shower is cold too. See, so we have to forget the assumption. Like, the assumptions are dangerous. Oh yeah, everything's hot and cold. 2 taps. Of course it is. Of course it's not, right? And the other axiom is that we don't know what we don't know. We don't know that we have to get down on our hands and knees and look under the sink, right? And so this concept is it's hard. I mean, we actually created something called the Consumer Resource Guide, right? It's 15 questions that people should ask when they buy property overseas, right? It's 15 things that we bring assumptions that are incorrect, or we don't know what we don't know, or in some cases, it's both, right? And what these questions really help us do as consumers is frame our thinking, or help us think a new way. Hey, I need to think differently because I am in buyer beware. So I have to ask questions I would never ask in the US or Canada. And if I do that, I can actually make a really good decision, right? It's not that we shouldn't buy property overseas. We just need to approach it differently. And so, as sort of a word of caution, as people get excited about buying property in El Salvador or other places, right? Go for it. I mean, absolutely go for it. But look, if people own in our community, they're going to have hot and cold water. I mean, we put in hot and cold water, and we put in electrical service that meets US standards. I mean, there are just a lot of things that, again, we just don't think about. But a lot of people are going to buy properties other places, and I hope they do. I mean, look, we're going to build 300 residences, and I hope 300,000 residences get sold, in El Salvador, right? I mean, or some big number, right? I think it'd be wonderful. I hope lots of people move there, and we get our 300 of them, and everyone else gets the rest, right? But the consumer coming outside the US, coming to El Salvador, has to be able to really change how they think. And this, the Consumer Resource Guide is a great tool to help people do that. So that would be the one word of caution. Slow down, proceed with caution, change how we think. And if we do that, we will make a good buying decision, a good ownership decision for a property overseas. But humility. If I had to just sum it up, humility, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's such a great thing to reiterate. I think of Bitcoin as one of the things that it's about is kind of radical personal responsibility, right? If you're holding your own private keys, you have to take responsibility for owning it. And that's something that, in a different access, people are not used to doing. Everybody's used to being able to like spend money and then being like, oh, someone tried to steal my money. And then they call a credit card company and the credit card company reverses the transaction, or something went wrong with my bank account. I lost my password. And there's somebody there who can basically just magically make it go away. And what people don't realize is that that kind of oversight, those kinds of systems have a significant cost, and they end up often being used against you. And so one of the things that is amazing about Bitcoin, and also, as you said, something that requires humility for people that are new to it, is this radical personal responsibility. So it's very interesting to me that translates to, buying property. It totally makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of Bitcoiners will be very used to that. And when framed as like, you keep your private keys very safe because you have to.
Yep.
It sounds like it's a similar thing when you're investing in property overseas.
It is. P, thank you. I love that. Radical personal responsibility. That's a beautiful way to say it. And if with your permission, I am going to pick up that line and use it in the future.
Absolutely. Go for it.
That's a good one. I love that. Thank you. Yeah. Right. Radical personal responsibility. Exactly. Right.
Mike, I'm going to paraphrase this question that we got from our chat. So essentially, I think the way I want to phrase it and have you walk us through, talk to us a little bit about when investors can buy into your next development, and then where a potential resident fits into that equation as well. I know you said you guys don't build, your sort of timeline is you essentially collect the money and then go off to build.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But what if someone who wants to be an investor or owner of a property isn't ready to live there? Talk us through sort of like what accommodations, if any, or systems you guys have in place. Like, is it easy for me to purchase one of the next lots and then just be Airbnb that out? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. So what we've done in El Zante is we actually set up a first right of selection program, fully refundable $2,500 Bitcoin deposit, and basically it gives you the first right of selection. And that's really about a year from now. I mean, and I don't know, like 25, 30 people have signed up for this, right? So next, let's just say next April, whatever, next May, we come to them and say, here's all the properties. They pick that one, or they say, give me my money back, no problem. I mean, one or the other, right? They pick one, now they're in. And so again, the construction timeline is about 12 months from the time somebody says, I want it, to the time they, get the keys. So again, we'd be looking at April of 24 at that point for the keys. And so, right, if somebody says, well, I want to use it a couple weeks a year, but I'm not ready to move down there full time, that's easy. We actually, again, we have a hospitality component to our business, because a lot of people are exactly like the person who asked that question. They want to put their property in a rental program. They want to receive some income from the property until they're ready to actually use it full time. Or by the way, we have some folks who never plan to use their property. They really see it as a rental cash flow investment for them for the long term, and maybe they use it as a vacation property once in a while. But it was the intended purpose with the ownership is to have it be a cash flow property as opposed to a residence. So we do that, and our hospitality business is well developed in Belize and Nicaragua currently, and we'll be doing the same thing in El Salvador when we bring that online.
Love that, guys. So any of you out there who are looking for your next Airbnb property, make sure you guys check out all the stuff that ECI is developing and building out. I know you guys are currently building out the community, the village. Talk to us about where you have your eyes set next. Maybe it's somewhere else in El Salvador, or maybe it's somewhere else entirely. Do you mind sharing or divulging?
Yeah, no, not at all. We actually, in two things going on. One, we have all of our properties in Belize are out on Ambergris Key, which is the main island off the coast. But next week, I'm like, when is that? It's next week. I'm down in Belize, and we'll be closing on a jungle property. We're working with a big Bitcoiner who purchased a resort in Belize. We actually operate. He contracted us to operate that resort for him, called Table Rock. It's 11 little cool, very cool cottages in the jungle, right on the Mopan River. It's spectacular, and we're closing on a property next to it for a residential community. So building a small village right next to the resort there. That's probably our next, what I'm going to call real live because it's already got roads, water, access. I mean, it's kind of ready to go. So we'll roll that one pretty quick. We have another project in Panama. It'll be our third project in Panama at the beach that it'll be a joint venture sometime this fall. We should have our permitting in place and be able to offer those products. And then a crazy one, totally really an outlier for us, is a villa in Portugal. It's in the Azores, actually. It's in the Azore Islands, about 2 hours west of Lisbon, out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. If you've never looked up the Azores, I hadn't until I was there last year. It is spectacular. It's beautiful. It's green, and these 9 little volcanic islands out in the middle of the ocean. But just a wonderful Portuguese culture. We're closing on a villa there in June that's already an operating bed and breakfast, and we're going to build some additional homes around that villa. So 3 things kind of in the works over the next, say, 12 months that folks might want to keep an eye out for. Very different, 3 very different things. And by the way, you mentioned something else in El Salvador. For us, the 300 residences, whatever, that's really about a 3 to 5 year build out once we start. And so we'll stay focused on that until maybe we're 2/3, 3/4 done, and then we'll begin looking for something else in El Salvador. So probably 2025, 2026, we'd be looking at doing additional product in El Salvador.
Chris, do you think now is a good time for us to pitch David Bailey on getting a Bitcoin magazine house?
There you go. I do.
A content house. Let's do it.
Yeah.
2 thumbs up.
I think CK just had a heart attack with the amount of money that would go into that. Mike, one last question from me before I let you sort of share with everyone how to stay up to date with everything. I love sort of what you guys are building, the community aspect of it, how, people need to be these convicted individuals who want this experience, who want this lifestyle. Yeah. I'm curious how you, if at all, want to incorporate more of a circular economy where you see some of the energy that's being used also maybe is mining or helping to mine Bitcoin for this community that is then able to capitalize on the Bitcoin that's mined to leverage out and continue to expand or grow these communities or villages. Any thoughts like that?
Absolutely. In fact, a lot of what we're doing with the tiny homes is, so I'll make up a number, I'm close on it, 77, 79 homes under construction at our Grand Pacifica community right now, tiny homes under construction. They are all 100% solar off grid. And so this is a big part of what we're doing with our tiny homes. In fact, we actually have homes up to about 2,000 square feet that are 100% off the grid as well. So we're big into gray water recycling. We have an agricultural component. Agricultural resiliency is a pretty important factor as well. So in the Zante project, that piece won't be there because it's a pretty compressed property. But where we have space, we do integrate agricultural elements for that resiliency. But the solar and so one of the things that we'd like to do in Zante is tie all of the solar together, or maybe not all of it, but much of it into chunks, because during the daytime, once your battery's full, right? But you're still producing electricity. And to have that surplus then run across to a mining center where the mining center would mine and produce coin, which would then offset, HOA costs, right? I mean, look, there will be an HOA. I mean, you gotta keep the streets, and you can keep the lights on, and and the amenities, keep the pool pumps working, and keep the pool. I mean, just all the things that takes money to do, have security and all those kinds of things. So we actually have talked about taking the excess electricity from the solar on everybody's homes, having it come in and contribute to mining that would offset the general expenses of operating the property for the homeowners association. So I think that's one element. I don't know that it will be hugely profitable per se, but I do think there will be an offset of significant HOA costs with the power that's produced from that. So again, I don't know the exact latitude. I think it's maybe 13, 14. I mean, it's strong sun, and about 7-8 months out of the year, it's really strong sun. It's overhead. I mean, it's actually physically overhead a couple times a year as it passes over. So great solar uptake, and then being able to utilize that, for mining to offset HOA costs. Yeah.
Love that. Love that. And Mike, I want to give you one last opportunity. I know that we've talked a lot and touched on a lot of different topics, but sort of give you the open mic, whether it's on this topic or something else entirely, just anything that we didn't touch on.
No, I really thank you guys for having me on and the conversation. The only thing that if it's okay, I would just like to tell folks how to get a copy of the Consumer Resource Guide. Is that okay? Yeah. I mean, easy. I'm an old guy. Look at me. So I'm still email. So I hope you guys are email, but Bitcoin@ecidevelopment.com. Bitcoin@ecidevelopment.com. We'll send you this. This is our Consumer Resource Guide. 15 questions that you should ask when you want to look at property ownership overseas. And if you see something in there, I mean, our website's in there. By the way, this is not a sales document. This is articles. These are the 15 questions. There's some little mini country handbooks. I think, like 5 or 6 little country handbooks we've got in here. So if you see anything you want, you can follow up with that. But we'd love to put this in your hand, because then you become the kind of consumer who's educated and smart. And if you're out there in El Salvador stomping around, you're going to look under the sink and you're going to see if there's hot water. You're going to go look at the panel box to make sure that it's got more than 4 breakers in it. I mean, just little things that, again, we as North Americans would never think to do, but we probably want to do if we want to love the home that we own. And you know what? A few of you probably will decide to become owners with us in El Zante, but the vast majority of you are going to buy somewhere else. And when you buy somewhere else, buy well, buy right, love the place that you own, and become incredible advocates for the expat property ownership overseas lifestyle. Raise the tide, because when you're telling great stories about your wonderful life in San Salvador or down the beach or anywhere in El Salvador, or if you buy a house in Thailand, whatever it is, when you're telling a great story about how awesome it is to buy property and live overseas or vacation overseas in your home, it really does great things for everybody who's doing it. So we're happy to provide this resource to you, and hope that you'll use it.
Awesome. So everyone who wants to, please check out it, Bitcoin@ecidevelopment.com.
That's it.
And Mike, where can, if people want to stay up to date with some of the projects you guys are building or get updates on the company, is there anywhere on social media that our generation, the young guys, can stay up to date with you on?
Yes. And I wish I knew what they were. It's horrible. But we do. We have a Facebook page. We have Instagram pages. We're on Twitter. We're on LinkedIn. And so all of that is out there. I wish I could tell you what those are off the top of my head. My bad. I will do better next time.
It's all good. Honestly, we were laughing because I was like, I don't think Mike has a Twitter, because we like to put our guests' Twitter handles on the screen. So I did find the ECI Development Twitter page. So that is on the screen. So be sure to check that out, guys. And Mike, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure having you. We'll be chatting again soon, or keeping an eye out for updates on the project at El Zante and everywhere else around Central America.
Really? Yeah. Thank you all for having me. I appreciate everything you're doing for the industry, and we'll see. Hey, look, next year at the Bitcoin conference, let's make sure we meet in person. Okay.
Love that.
All right.
Awesome.
Thanks,
guys, we're going to cut to a quick commercial break. Then we're going to chat, just a few of us, before we're joined by Econoalchemist. And then we are going to dive right into Bitcoin mining at the homes. So stick around. You're not going to want to miss these conversations. Oof. up, fam? We are back. It is now entering we're not yet there, but we're coming up on the second hour of today's episode. I want to make sure before I say this, nice, we're at 69 likes, but you know the drill. We don't start dropping sats until we get to 100. So for all of you guys who have not yet smashed the like button, please do so. If you're not a subscriber, you can't join us in the chat either. So make sure you smash that subscribe button and join the conversation on the side. We'll be taking questions from the chat as well, but we are now joined by Econoalchemist. Econoalchemist, how you doing today, man?
I'm good. How you guys doing? Thanks for having me.
Fantastic.
We're awesome, man.
Doing well. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, definitely.
Look, I got my pen. I got my notebook here somewhere. Oh, here it is. I'm pretty much ready to pass the mic off to you and take notes and learn how I'm about to start mining Bitcoin at home the proper way. So I'm going to let you sort of take it away and take us on this journey. I will, full disclosure, I genuinely want to do this myself. If it makes it easier for conversation's sake, feel free to use like California or your local most recent sort of build out and what hurdles you dealt with, energy costs and infrastructure dealios. But I'd love to just first start with, why should everyone be mining Bitcoin at home?
Yeah, definitely. Mining at home solves a lot of issues. And one of the primary issues it solves is acquiring non-KYC Bitcoin. When I got into mining Bitcoin at home, I was just looking for a way to accumulate more Bitcoin without using any KYC services. About a year and a half ago, the narratives were that you can't mine Bitcoin at home because your electricity is too expensive. You'd be better off spending your money at an exchange. You can't compete with the large miners. And Diverter, his Twitter handle is @Diverter_no KYC. He put out his guide called Mining for the Streets. And in that guide, he just shattered all of those narratives. And that really opened my eyes to mining being a viable solution. So I got in touch with him. He got me pointed in the right direction. And that's how I got started. And so basically, the reason it's not like, the reason you don't need to worry about competing with the large miners is because you're not running a business. You're just trying to dollar cost average through your energy bill. So that's a lot different than trying to run a business and keep this competitive edge. So long as you can accumulate Bitcoin for less than spot price through your utility bill, then you're way ahead of the game. And even if you're just breaking even, at least you're still getting dollar for dollar value in the money you spent on electricity for the Bitcoin you earned. And you have the benefit of not exposing yourself to the KYC risk. Or even if you are paying a little bit more in electricity than the value of the Bitcoin you're getting at the time, that might be worth it to some people, depending on how much they value non-KYC Bitcoin. So I think there's a lot of room for this to work for a lot of people in totally different situations. And the other thing that it solves too is just working with Bitcoin in a self-custodial manner by default. So you get these mining rewards from the pool, you have to put them in your own wallet. So it's helping encourage people to use self-custody right off the bat. And it's very hands-on. It's more tangible than just like running a node. Every home situation is different, and you get these people like coming up with all these creative solutions for the problems that they encounter in their home. And, if you don't have access to a bank account or any banking services, like being able to just plug a computer in and mine and accumulate Bitcoin is a way to have access to financial tools that allow you to interact economically with peers around you.
Yeah, I think one other thing I would say is the educational experience of going through and setting up your own miner is absolutely incredible. Like, you think you understand how Bitcoin works, and then the process of mining and understanding mining pools, it really concretely gives you a solid anchoring in how everything fits together.
Yeah, definitely. For a long time when I was getting into Bitcoin and just getting started, mining was just kind of this black box operation that I just didn't understand. It was really mysterious. I kind of avoided it because of the perceived complexity. And then once I started getting into it and getting my hands on it, dude, it's actually like way easier than setting up a node from scratch, in my opinion. The technical side of it. You pretty much just copy a pool URL into the miner's configuration file and away you go. Now, dealing with some of the infrastructure stuff can be a little more complex, but depending on your do-it-yourself skills, like, I think a lot of people are finding this to be a really good solution for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the Bitcoin 2022 panel that you were kind enough to join, the mining for the streets, you talked about setting your power lines on fire.
Yeah.
Yep. It's good stuff.
And
I'm jealous.
Yeah, dude. So definitely consult with a licensed electrician anytime you try like doing this stuff at home. Electrical is very dangerous. If you don't know what you're doing, you don't have any business in the electrical panel. Even someone like myself who, I have a lot of electrical experience. I'm not a certified electrician or licensed, but I do have a lot of working experience with electrical. And even with that, I still set the overhead lines outside my house on fire because I wasn't fully aware of the intricacies of that circuit. So you never know what's going to catch you off guard, and it's definitely best to consult with a licensed electrician.
One thing you said that I really liked or appreciated was just this idea of, energy costs can sort of be, you can treat it in the same way that we do with stacking sats, where like, we're not really so much worried about the price, but for anyone like me who is really trying to like buy heavy on this current dip, we're seeing Bitcoin is now at the time of us speaking crashed below $31,000. And I put crashed in quotes because I still remember the days when we were talking about, I can't wait until Bitcoin's just worth 30K.
Right.
So feel free to stack sats. I just threw some at Strike, not a sponsor, but Jack, feel free to throw us a sponsorship. Walk us a little bit through this psyche. I really like this analogy though, of like, hey, if you have the higher cost of energy, that's fine, because then you can start to dilute some of your stack with some KYC free Bitcoin or KYC free sats, and then you can still be stacking heavier. You can still have that KYC Bitcoin that you're maybe living off of or whatever you want to do with it, but you can use the cost of energy as that barometer of, hey, maybe right now is a good time to be doubly invested in mining, or hey, maybe right now is the time to be put our take our gas foot off the gas pedal. Jesus, it's a Monday, sorry. Take our foot off the gas pedal. Break that dynamic down for us if you could.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to the individual's unique situation again. Like, for myself, for example, like I'm living off of Bitcoin completely right now. I don't have a fiat job. It's been about 7 months since I was fired from my job.
Congratulations.
And thanks. Yeah. No, it was a very exciting time because they were coming down with vaccine mandates, and I wasn't going to cave in to their to the loss of my bodily autonomy. So I let them fire me.
Please tell me that when you did that, it was like an epic, firing. Like I just imagine you bringing like one of your miners into the office, and then your boss like sitting you down and being like, "So we got to have a hard conversation." And you just flipping the switch and being like, "I can't hear you over how much Bitcoin I'm mining right now." And just being like, "Get out."
I wish. No, it was actually pretty uneventful, man. I had worked there for 10 years and I knew the boss pretty well. And we had been trying to like work something out for about a month before he actually had to make the decision to fire me. So, we were both on the same page about it, but business is business and they had to let me go. So it was what it was. My wife and I sold that house, moved out to the country. So for the last 7 months, I've been trying to gear up my new Bitcoin miner setup in my shipping container. Taking a little bit longer than I wish it would, but back to the discussion about paying that energy bill. So, I'm getting a commercial service ran to the shipping container, and I'm going to have a really good rate. But right now, I'm running 2 miners on my residential meter, and that has a much higher rate. And since I don't have a fiat job, there's really no way for me to just pay that electricity bill out of pocket, kind of the way you would like pay out of pocket to stack sats every month, right? Like if you can afford like $300 to $500 a month from your paycheck, then you're stacking sats. You know, the idea is why not spend $300 to $500 a month on your electricity bill and accumulate non-KYC Bitcoin instead. Well, when you don't have a fiat income and all you have is Bitcoin, you know, I'm spending Bitcoin every month to pay my bills, including that electricity bill. And so with this recent price dip and the price of my electricity being so high, I actually had to unplug my miners 2 days ago when we breached below 36,000. And that's just because at this point, like I have to sell like more Bitcoin than I'm earning through mining just to pay the electricity bill. And so if you're in a situation like that where you don't have that fiat income, then you know you really got to be careful about how that dynamic lines up between the trading price of Bitcoin, your electricity price, and like how much hash rate you have and what kind of rewards you're earning. So, you know, for me, I'm just monitoring like how low can that fiat price go before I have to pull the plug based on how much I'm paying in electricity. You know, just to throw some rough numbers out there, my electricity bill, all said and done, comes out to about 20 cents per kilowatt hour. And so with Bitcoin trading below 36,000, if I'm paying 20 cents a kilowatt hour and I'm running two miners for, you know, 6,600 watts together, that math just doesn't add up. But, you know, if your electricity price is low enough, like the US national average is 13 cents per kilowatt hour. And so that's still profitable for a lot of people, even with this price dip right now. And that's if you're selling Bitcoin to pay the electricity bill, you're still walking away with some good headroom there. And if you have a job that you're paying the electricity bill with out of pocket, then that's even better because then you can just hold all of that Bitcoin and you don't have to sell any of it to pay your electricity bill.
Ain't that the dream?
Yeah. So I'm trying to get this shipping container up as quickly as possible because my like all-in rate when that's all said and done is going to be like 4 cents per kilowatt hour.
All right. Definitely like break this down. Like obviously you are getting like a very specific system in place to generate energy and then make it cheaper. California, very lame answer to that is like set up solar panels because it's always sunny in Los Angeles. In other parts of the world, like you have different resources or different ways to do it. Have you found certain of these different energy sources to be better than others? Like, is it better if you can just purely come straight from the house? Is that energy source better than some sort of a generator or some sort of secondary or tertiary energy mining this Bitcoin miner?
Yeah, you know, I think there's a couple different approaches here. So like supplementing your power with like a generator or solar panels, or maybe you live on a property that has water rights and you can stick a water wheel in there to generate some hydro. You know, supplementing your power usage can definitely help offset your power costs. So I think the idea there is that you're still plugged into the grid. It's just that you're generating enough energy to like make it so you only consume like a percentage of what you normally would from the grid, where the rest of that is coming from your alternative power source. The thing you got to be careful about there, though, I think, is like your upfront capital costs. So if you don't have a solar panel array installed already, well, you might have to spend $20,000, $50,000 to get that installed. So then you got to ask yourself, well, if I'm going to spend $50,000 to get this solar panel system installed, like how much is that going to offset my bill? Is it going to cover the miner completely? Or am I still going to be depleting all that solar power and then, you know, still dipping into the grid power a little bit? And then you also want to ask yourself, like, all right, how long could I run my miner just paying the straight grid power with $50,000 or whatever that capital expense is? You know, if you can run your miner for 7 years with $50,000, maybe it's a better idea just to pay the on-grid electricity than to spend $50,000 on a solar panel system. So, you know, I would just think about your capital expenses. But really, what I've found is that one of the best things you can do is actually like start digging into these tariffs and rate schedules that all the utility companies provide. And so this is kind of like a not so well-known secret. These utility companies don't advertise that they actually offer a variety of different rate schedules, and they have these different tariffs spelled out in their documentation. When you sign up with your utility company, they'll usually just put you on the default like residential rate. Well, if you go on their website and search for rate schedule or tariff, you'll find these really long, like 300-page documents. And in there, you're going to see that they actually have like different rate schedules spelled out for like every imaginable power consumption situation you might find yourself in. And so what I did here, like with my setup, I'm not using any alternative power generation source. What I did was I went on my utility company's website and I found their tariffs, and I combed through that until I found like the absolute best rate. And then I kind of designed my system from that point backwards. And I said, okay, what do I have to do to make my electrical system qualify for this rate designation with the utility company? And so once I knew that, then I was able to like call the electricians and say, look, I need this kind of meter, I need these kinds of panels, I need, I'm trying to get this kind of service installed. And then I was able to call the utility company and tell them, all right, I need a 400 amp service, I'm going to have it ran to 1 meter, I'm going to have these kinds of panels, and then I want to try and get on this commercial rate. And being equipped with that information that I found in the tariffs really made it possible for me to have those informed discussions with the electricians and the utility company and like get everybody to work together to make this match that rate that is like, it's like finding a unicorn, really.
That's such good advice. I love that, like arbitraging the various schemes that the power company has set up to incentivize various power usage patterns.
Exactly. Yeah. Because basically they have like a threshold, and it's like, if you have one metering point that's not your main residence, so it's on like a barn or an outbuilding, or in my case, a shipping container, and you can provide at least a 50 kilowatt load, then you qualify for this rate designation. And so, that's kind of how it spells out at a high level. So I basically just took that information and made sure my system was going to like check all those boxes.
Yeah.
So that when I went to the power company, they're like, okay, cool, you're good to go. Here's your 4-cent kilowatt power.
That's amazing, man. I lived in SF until recently, and I tried to do that at one point, just in the most basic level, because you can go in and it's like, if you're using your power between like 1 a.m. and 7 a.m., you get this rate, and you can like choose like based on your power usage patterns. But I did all the math, and it was basically like, we'll kick you in the crotch once if you're using it on this power usage pattern, and twice if you're using this other one. But that was just because I was living in SF and I was paying like 26 cents per kilowatt hour. It's like, There's no way that's ever profitable.
Yeah. And it's sad because usually like residential services like have the least amount of options,
Yeah.
It's when you get like into like running service to an outbuilding or a barn, then you can get like an agricultural status or like a commercial status. And then that's where you start finding these other rates. And like you said, like the time of use rates on residential, like those can be an option. But yeah, residential customers, unfortunately, just kind of get like the most limited menu of options. But it's out there, if I definitely encourage people to like go on their utility company's website and search for their rate schedules, because you might be surprised what you find. And the other thing is like, depending on what part of the country you're in, you might be in what's called like a full retail choice market, where like you as an individual can actually have a choice as to who your retail energy supplier is. And so there's a distinction here between like retail energy supplier and utility company. So the retail energy suppliers are buying the energy in bulk, and then they're working with the utility company, and the utility company is distributing that power. And so if you reside in like a full retail market where you have that choice, you can actually find different retail energy suppliers that are competitive and have different rates. And if you can find one that will sell you power for cheaper, then you might be able to save a little bit there.
I'm curious if you could touch on, like, there's that age-old argument or discussion, like, can solar energy really power a miner? In your experience, how much energy, how many panels are needed to operate just one ASIC?
That's a great question. And to be totally honest with you, I don't have any solar experience. I've helped some people like run some numbers and try and give them a second opinion on making that decision in their setup. I think it is possible to run miners strictly off of solar, but you need to have a very robust and large system to handle that, because one miner, a new generation miner is pulling 3,250 watts. So or 3.25 kilowatts. So you're going to need a solar panel system that can handle that kind of load. And that's, 3.25 kilowatts every hour. So you multiply that by 24 and, that's a pretty substantial load. And then if you want to depend on it 24/7, then you need an even bigger system to charge a battery so that when the sun goes down or there's cloud coverage, then that battery has enough power on reserve to keep your operation going if you're trying to do it 100% solar. And so, then we get back into like the capital expense decision, like how much am I going to have to spend on the battery? How many more panels am I going to need? It can add up to be quite a bit. And I think in a lot of situations, you might be better off just paying the on-grid utility rate instead if you don't have that kind of system in place already.
Sorry, I'm playing Jenga with all the different picks over here. So bear with me on some of these longer pauses. I want to also present one other question that it's not energy related. This is from our chat box from earlier, but can you describe, I'm just going to actually read this because I don't think I can paraphrase this. Can you just break down what is going on computationally when a Bitcoin is actually mined?
Sure, yeah, I'll try my best. And just to caveat this, I'm not a developer. I don't know how to write code. I don't have a computer science background, but I'll try to explain it the best I understand it. So you have the mempool. It's full of transactions that are trying to get included in the block. And then you have these mining pools that are looking to the mempool, and they're taking a bunch of those transactions, and most of them are organizing them by which transactions are paying the highest fee in the transaction fee, the miner's fee. So they'll stack up a block and they'll say, okay, this is the block of transactions that we want to mine. And then they have like a block header on top of that. And that header is just a little bit of information. And so what they can do is they can just take that header information and they can distribute that to all the miners in their pool. And so they're just giving them a little bit of data. They don't have to give them all the transactions that are included in the header. They just give them that basic header information. And so then all the miners that are connected to the pool will receive this little bit of data, and they'll look at that and they'll say, okay, my goal is to compute a hash value on this data that starts with so many zeros. And that number of zeros can change depending on what the difficulty adjustment is at that moment in time. And so the way they come up with like different hash values is they'll change what's called a nonce. And the nonce is just like a little 32-bit integer that they can change. It's just a random number. And they'll basically take that block header, compute a nonce, and see if the hash value results in something that starts with so many numbers of zeros. And if you've ever seen like a SHA-256 hash value, it's just like a long string of random characters, right? So what they're looking for is a long string of random characters that starts with a certain number of zeros. And if they find that, then they'll send that back to the pool and say, hey, I found one. And then the pool will look at that and say, okay, cool, here's all the transactions for that. And then they'll broadcast it out across their very well connected infrastructure to the other mining pools so that it gets seen fast. And then the other mining pools will look at that and they can quickly check it and say, yeah, that's a valid hash and that's a valid block. Now we'll start mining on top of that one, because each block has to have the hash value of the previous block included in it. So then they'll say, okay, we'll include that one in our new block header, and then we'll start the process all over again.
I think that's a great explanation, Econo. I guess I had another question then. So obviously miners or pools in particular can win blocks in succession. So is it the one, I guess maybe you don't know the background behind it, but let's just say, for example's purposes, your machine wins. And whether you know that or not, you know that I think you're linked up with Slush Pool in your article, but let's just say your machine in particular wins. So it's obviously mining the transactions or the blocks for that transaction. Does the rest of the pool say, okay, well, that device or your miner is including all the blocks or developing the block, let's look for the next transaction? Or does it have to wait for it to finish in that 10-minute span before it looks? I guess I'm just confused of how that works. And if you could lay that out, maybe.
Yeah, so basically your, like in Slush Pool's case, you're gonna have all the mining rewards are gonna be shared among all the miners in the pool. And so if you have, your machine finds a block, well, you're not going to get the whole block reward. You're still only going to get your proportional rewards based on how much hash value you are providing to the pool. And everyone who's contributing to the pool will get paid out in proportion to their contributed hash rate. And so the way Slush Pool does it is they'll pay per last n shares. And so they'll kind of figure out like a average hash rate that you're contributing, and they'll pay you out based on that. Whereas other pools like Solo CK Pool, if your specific machine finds a block, then you're going to get 98% of that entire block reward. And then CK Pool is going to keep 2%. And everyone else who's also contributing to Solo CK Pool, well, they're not going to get anything. So, Solo CK Pool is still like a centralized pool like Slush is. It's just the payout structure is different. And so what happens is like you compute a valid hash value on a block header, and you send that back to Slush Pool, and they see that, they verify it, and then they broadcast that block with all the transactions included. Because remember, like your miner probably hasn't seen any of the transactions. Your miner's just getting that block header from Slush Pool and trying to compute that nonce on it. And so you send that valid hash value back to Slush. They look at it, they say, yeah, that's good. They put all the transactions in that block and they broadcast that out to the rest of the pools. And as soon as the rest of the pools see it, they like stop trying to compute on the whatever they were working on currently, and they verify that yours is valid, and they say, okay, this is now the latest tip of the Bitcoin blockchain, so we're going to start computing a new block using the hash value of this one that just came through. And then they'll like try to extend the chain based off of that most recent valid block.
Thanks. That's a lot of help. Q or P, do you have any questions?
Q is gesturing frantically as he tries to get his Jenga tower not to collapse.
Let me tell you, man, the limited number of ports on my MacBook Air, like Apple, you guys are assholes. That's all I'm gonna say about that.
Bro, we got to get you a better computer.
Nick Beard. Anyways, though, so I want to make sure we've really established like the energy need before we continue to dive down sort of step by step. Econoalchemist, is there anything else? I loved the tip about like, I'm literally going now, my dad and I are going to comb through our energy provider and see how we can like readjust that. Are there any other sort of tips and tricks that you have found in your experience that help elevate your home mining operation as far as an energy setup is concerned?
Yeah, I mean, I would say just make sure you're like double checking your math and you're, having a second set of eyes help you design your infrastructure. a lot of times people are going to have to install like new electrical circuits in their home to do this. So you want to work with a licensed electrician to do that. And, you know, there's plenty of good resources like on Telegram. There's the Home Mining Wizards channel, and I'm in there. There's like 2,400 home miners in there, and everyone in there is super helpful and willing to share their experience and give you a second opinion on things if you want. So if you do need to install a circuit, I would just make sure you're getting a second opinion, you're getting some help from a licensed electrician. And I would also like caution people to be careful about like who they're telling that they're going to be mining Bitcoin at home. You just never really know like how people are going to react to it, especially like with the utility company. I've heard of a couple people who were just being completely honest with their utility company, and they said, yeah, I'd like to get a new service ran. I'm trying to do some Bitcoin mining. And the utility company got really like standoffish at that point and kind of lost interest in helping them. So you don't want to put yourself in that position. You know, I'm not saying you need to like lie about what you're doing, but maybe just phrase it as though you're trying to set up something similar to a data center where you're running a bunch of high-powered computers 24/7. You know, and maybe just kind of leave the Bitcoin part of it out of the conversation.
I just told them that I was going to be growing a bunch of weed, and so I needed a lot of electricity. And they were like,
Yep.
what are the specs? And I was like, I just need all of it. Like, if you can just hook it up, it'd be great.
Yeah, it's
that's
usually
really-
the safer option.
P, that's really funny because where I live, I had a buddy that kind of was in a very similar situation. He plugged in a couple miners, and the electrical company called him like, you are going to burn the box like off the wall. Like, what are you doing? And he's like, yeah, like I'm not doing anything wrong. And they're like, he got to a point where they're like, we're going to turn off your power if you don't tell us what you're doing. And he's like, do I go the route of saying I'm growing weed, or do I say I'm mining Bitcoin? And he took the fateful route of saying he's mining Bitcoin. And they're like, oh, okay, we thought you were doing something else, is kind of what they said. And they were actually really happy. And the electrician came out, and I'll give like the anecdotal story, but the guy's like, so you mean to tell me my wife doesn't know about this and this is screwing over the government? Sign me up. How do I get in here? So leave it to redneck electricians to want to get into Bitcoin mining. So he got a client in doing that, and he was actually really cool with helping him up with his electrical panel. But yeah, he was spreading Bitcoin adoption through mining, which I thought was really funny.
I love it.
This conversation is making me very nervous for the weed farm that I've attempted to start in my closet. So now it sounds like I have a choice to make, and this is going to be a very difficult choice, guys.
Just tell them that you're doing the thing that you're not doing. So like if the power company comes to you and they're like, what are you doing? Just be like, I'm mining Bitcoin.
But really, I'm growing weed in my closet.
And actually, like a smart grower is going to run Bitcoin miners while their lights are off. Because if you think about it from the power company's point of view, they're going to see like 5,000 kilowatt demand, and then 12 hours later, no kilowatt demand. And then 12 hours later, 5,000 kilowatt demand. So if you like have your setup so your miners turn on when your lights turn off, then you maintain a pretty steady load, and it makes that like signature of growing harder to detect.
Isn't that also what the power company wants ultimately? They want to be able to rely on you to provide consistent load across their system, so that when they're investing in these like, you know, higher gauge or lower gauge, whatever it is, wires, that it's not sort of lost potential revenue, right?
Right. Yeah. There's actually a lot of benefit that can come with being an individual or company who is providing a base load to the utility company. They're in business to sell electricity, and that's what they want. And the more that they can sell like electricity in large, constant, consistent amounts, then the more that they can invest in their infrastructure. Like where I'm located, the kind of market I'm in is called like a monopoly market, where the utility company owns the power generation assets, the bulk transmission assets, the substations, the local distribution network. They own they're vertically integrated. They own the whole stack. So when you're dealing with a monopoly market, well, the only reason they can legally run a monopoly is if they agree to be regulated by a public utility commission. And so that's like a state board that comes in and says, okay, you can only make, for example, 10% profit on your total capital investments per year. And so what do these monopoly companies do then? The incentive then isn't to price gouge their customer. The incentive is to spend as much money as they can on their capital infrastructure investments. That way the value of that 10% profit is worth more. So in my case, when I went to them and I said, hey, I'm going to be able to provide at least a 50 kilowatt load constantly 24/7. They're like, okay, cool. Tell you what, they came back and they're like, tell you what, we'll give you the pole and the transformer for free.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm getting like this, I mean, they're going to make their money back with
Of course.
profit, but it's costing me less out of pocket up front. So now I don't have to pay for the pole. I don't have to pay for the transformer. I'm getting those installed for free. I just had to pay my electricians to install the panels. And then, usually when you're doing an upgrade, a service run like that, the utility company's not going to connect their lines to your system until it's passed an inspection. So don't try and like sidestep that. I know a lot of like do-it-yourselfers will sidestep inspections, but if you need the power company involved with anything you're doing, they're going to have to see a valid and recent inspection done. So, just make sure you're doing that right from the get-go.
Econoalchemist, before we jump into the actual hardware, both things that you would recommend, tips of the trade, I'm curious your thoughts on, like, obviously this conversation is rooted around mining Bitcoin at home, but there are also a lot of offerings from companies, third parties that will essentially host a miner on your behalf. What are your thoughts on having your own miner at home versus letting these third parties sort of be your miner for you?
Yeah, I think there's some trade-offs there that people really need to consider. I approach it from kind of like the not your keys, not your coins sort of point of view. So if your hardware isn't in your hands, then you don't really own it. And unfortunately, we've seen situations unfold like where Russia gets sanctioned and there's a bunch of people who have their mining equipment hosted with a third-party provider out there, and suddenly they get cut off from their hardware overnight. They're not even allowed to have their hardware exported from the country back into their possession, and there's nothing they can do to continue that agreement because now that would be considered working with a sanctioned entity. And unfortunately, like, those people are just really hosed. And so anytime hosting comes up now, I think if we're going to have an honest conversation about it, we have to recognize that that's a risk. And up until recently, I think people who spoke about hosting risks talked about those sort of situations as in the hypothetical sense. But now we have like a matter of fact instance to look back on and say, no, this happened. You can no longer brush off that threat as being hypothetical. You have to recognize that this is a valid risk, and you have to like include that risk into your assessment as to whether or not hosting is going to be an answer for you. I empathize with people who don't want to deal with the heat and the noise in their homes because it is a lot to deal with. This is industrial grade equipment, 150 degrees Fahrenheit at the output, 85 decibels from the fans. It can be a lot to deal with, especially if you have roommates or family and you're trying to bring this sort of industrial grade equipment into your living space. So I can understand why hosting may look attractive from that point of view, but you really have to weigh that trade-off. Like, is it worth not having the control over the hardware? And you have to ask yourself, what happens when you spend $10,000 on a piece of mining equipment and then you lose access to that and you no longer have the ability to make decisions about what happens to that?
Those risks also exist just based on the jurisdiction you live in. Like we witnessed last year, right around now, China just outright banned mining. We're witnessing New York State attack miners, but it could just as easily, with the stroke of a pen, be an attack on home miners. So I think the jurisdictional battle is warranted across the spectrum, and it's a conversation that Bitcoiners need to regularly have because it feeds back into this loop and cycle of it doesn't matter. Like if they so choose, they can attack us from any angle, and if we don't hold it ourselves, you now leave an area to be exposed. Please. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add on to that.
Yeah, definitely. You know, you bring up a valid point. Like the things that are perfectly legal today can be made illegal overnight with the stroke of a pen. And you may find yourself being called a criminal, being discredited, being demonized for doing the things that were once perfectly legal and fine. And so, you know, I would say to that, if at least if you're running your own miner at home, then the hardware is in your hands and you maintain full control over being able to make that decision for yourself. The choice is yours. Whereas if you're hosting with someone else and some law changes overnight, well, then that decision's no longer yours to make. It's that trusted third party who has to come in and say, well, we're sending your miner back to you, or we're liquidating your miner because it's in a sanctioned zone, or you know, whatever the situation is. So I think home miners really should make considerations and, you know, hope for the best but plan for the worst. So if you want to mine at home, why not start by making like privacy best practice decisions from the get-go? Mine using a VPN, use a burner account for your mining pool setup. You know, don't tell your electrician that you're going to be mining Bitcoin at home. Don't tell your neighbors you're going to mine at home. Try to like attenuate the noise as best that you can and use those solutions that others have provided and documented. Use those solutions to learn from and incorporate those into your setup from the get-go, just so that in the off chance that you do become considered a criminal for mining Bitcoin at home, then you're in a much better position to either continue mining and make that choice to continue mining, even though it's technically a criminal act, or you know, you can shut down your operation. But at least if you've been using a VPN, if you've been using a burner account, if you've been whirlpooling your rewards on chain, if you've been taking all those steps to like attenuate the sound, then you're going to be in a much better position to continue hiding it. And you know, I'll tell you something right now. If a law passed where I live that says it's illegal to mine Bitcoin, I'm going to continue mining Bitcoin. I'm not going to let the stroke of a pen dictate what I do. You know, I'm not going to live my life where I'm losing freedoms as time goes on. I have this freedom now, and I'm going to do everything within my power to defensively guard that freedom and make sure that I have it tomorrow, regardless of what the laws say.
I want to tack on to that, and it's even a lot of really good points there, Econo. But even to that, like, look what happened in Canada, and I know a couple people touched on it, but like the stroke of the pen, it wasn't like legal and then illegal. It was, you know, legal up to this point, and then we're going to retroactively like harm people that did it in the past. Like it was legal, and I still to this day don't know how the lawyers are. I know they pulled the Emergency Act and they did all that, but basically to say like something that was legal, it's normally starting on this date or this time, it's now illegal. But they were like retroactively were banning people, shutting off bank accounts. Like it was even worse. And so I just think it goes to the point, like the state hates you. I know we always say that, but it's so true that like they will do things that are normal people would say that's insane or insanity. And like, how could they do that? And that's a really good question. I don't have the answer for that, but it's just, to your point, like you want to use privacy best practices and kind of advocate for yourself in that way.
Yeah, definitely. And I would just add to that the old saying that goes like, when laws are unjust, it's a man's obligation to defy those laws, or you know, something like that. So you know, don't live your life in a way where you wind up losing your freedoms as time goes on. Like draw that line and defensively guard it. You know, the tools are out there for individuals to maintain their freedoms, and people have to start using the tools and defensively guarding the freedoms that they value if they want to be able to continue to live their lives the way they want to live them. Otherwise, the encroachment on your rights and on your freedoms, it's never going to stop. That never goes away.
One thing I do just want to jump in and say, Chris, you know, I don't think it's fair to say that the state hates you. I think it's more that, you know, the state wants to take all your money, your freedoms, grind you into a thin paste, and then feed you to the masses. I think that would be like a more accurate way to depict it.
I maybe got ahead of myself. I said it wrong. I think that's a better description of it for sure.
Yeah, I think the clarity is important here. So
yeah, it's like, you know, you're basically a piece of meat being sold at a meat market. You know, the people are nothing but a product. And I mean, if Pfizer making nearly $8 billion in the first 3 months of 2022 on a product that was only 12% effective, like, if that doesn't go to show you that civilization, your friends, your family, everyone around you is just a product being squeezed for profit for someone else, like, I don't know what's going to open your eyes to that fact of life if that hasn't done it already.
It is fucking crazy, the backflips, the mental gymnastics that people will do to like justify that and be like, well, they didn't know. It's like, no, they did. It's right here in this report. Read the report. And they're like, well, I read it. And you're like, no, you didn't. They're like, well, but I heard somebody who said that they read it, and that person probably did. And then also, like, I mean, you know, these were challenging times. I'm like, that is fucking bullshit. Like, what are we even talking about here?
Right.
Infuriating.
That's crazy, dude.
Trying times indeed. But selfishly, I need to figure out, I think it looks like this week, if I'm going to buy a whole Bitcoin or if I'm going to buy a miner. So this is the perfect opportunity for me to now ask you, Econoalchemist, of the different products that are available for hardware, which ones do you prefer, and which ones are easier for the not technically savvy guys like this one?
So I would definitely say, like, if you're thinking about getting into mining, it's better to start small and to like scale that up a little bit at a time. Don't bite off more than you can chew and like totally dive in. I recommend starting with one miner. And if you're like not so sure about whether or not mining is going to be for you, maybe start with something that's like a lower barrier to entry, like try and find a good used S9. Kaboom Rack sells S9s whenever they have them available. So you can get like a good used S9 for somewhere between $300 to $500. That's not a whole lot of risk. It's going to give you that learning experience of like what kind of noise it's going to make, what kind of heat, what you're going to have to do to manage that noise and heat. Or if you're like really for sure that you're just set on mining and you're going to make it work no matter what, then, you know, maybe consider buying like a new WhatsMiner M30S or Antminer S19 Pro. You can also get those from some good places to get new hardware is like Upstream Data. Full disclosure, I am affiliated with them, but they are selling new hardware now. Mine Farm Buy also sells that hardware. Blockware Solutions sells that hardware, although I think they have like a 5 ASIC minimum. And then of course, Kaboom Rack sells that hardware. And those are all good companies. I've worked with all of them, so I can vouch for any of them. But yeah, to your more specifically to your question, I would say the M30S, the WhatsMiner M30S, or the Antminer S19 Pro are going to be two long-lasting, really good pieces of hardware. And I do believe that these are going to be the workhorses that last well into the next difficulty epoch. My personal preference, I kind of like the WhatsMiners better. I just think that they are a little bit better engineered, and the engineer that designed the S9 actually left Bitmain and went to work for MicroBT. And so he's the guy that has been designing the new WhatsMiner machines. And what have we learned about the S9 is that it's going on 6 years old. It's still holding up a large percentage of the Bitcoin network. And a lot of them, you know, as many as like 3 million S9s are still hashing profitably today. And I think that they're just a real testament to that kind of engineering. And so that guy that was in charge of that engineering project is now making the new What's miners. So I think that those are really going to be the next generation's workhorse. And if you want to invest in a piece of hardware that's going to last a long time, that doesn't require a whole lot of maintenance, I would go with the What's miner. I think the good thing right now is that you really can't make a bad choice between like the What's miner or the Ant miner. I think you're going to get a great piece of hardware no matter what you decide.
I love that, and I'm forever grateful for that breakdown. I want to like get a sense from you, because Chris, you were the one who kind of brought this up, that some of the like one ant miner now, the hash rate it can contribute to the network is the total hash rate from like years ago. And holy shit, Alex. Oh, okay. I was like, Alex, did you just really breaking news, President Bukele just bought 500 Bitcoins, because you know what he does, he buys the dip. Also a solid FU to the IMF, but figured we should share that live. Anyways, back to me mumbling around, jumbling for the actual question that I want to ask you. So the miners today have so much hashing power compared to what the total hash rate was years ago. You brought up two great examples of miners that you think will stand the test of time. What are you looking for as far as like hash rate and for the sake of longevity? And does it matter over the course of a long-term horizon? Like I'm talking generations, not just like a couple of years for a get rich quick sort of situation.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I guess I should, start with mining is not a get rich quick scheme. If that's kind of where your mind's at, and I'm not saying you specifically, but you in general, if that's where your mind is at, mining probably isn't going to give you that sort of outcome. It's more of a long game. You're taking a lot of money. A new generation miner, like the What's miner M30S, for example, 110 terahash version of that right now is going to run you about $8,300 in US dollars. So, that's a significant chunk of money. And there's probably other things you could do with that money to get rich quick, but I don't think mining is going to be one of them. Now, when looking for a miner, I would say my point of view is that you really should try and get like the most efficient ASIC you can buy today, because the hardware that's getting developed and getting produced and getting shipped out to market, and all the other Bitcoin miners around you that are going to be buying tomorrow, that hardware is getting more and more efficient every single day. So you want to try and get the most efficient hardware that you can get today for your money. So that's why I would say, like, if you're set on mining, get like the What's miner M30S plus, or like the Antminer S19 Pro, either like a J or an A series. Try and get the most efficient miner you can, because the network difficulty is just going to keep increasing. We just came off of, like, I think the last difficulty adjustment was, if I recall, like around 5%. It looks like the one we're heading into in a couple of days is going to be like another 5%. Hash rate is setting a new all-time high right now. So, that trend is not going to change significantly unless we have another major event like we had with like the China mining exodus, which very well could happen, but I wouldn't really bank on it. I would just bank on difficulty going up and hash rate going up. So when difficulty goes up, your mining rewards are going to be a little bit less and a little bit less, because you as a home miner, you've only got a small static input to the overall Bitcoin network. And so as that overall network hash rate continues to get larger and larger, those rewards are getting distributed to more and more miners, and you're receiving a little bit less because your static input is shrinking in comparison to the overall network hash rate. So now, does that really matter long term? Well, I think that's kind of where your your goals and your price of electricity come into play. So, if your goals are just to like dollar cost average through your utility bill, and because you value no KYC Bitcoin, then it may not matter to you as much if your rewards get a little bit less over time. And if you have a relatively low electricity rate, then that's probably going to matter less to you even more. Because if you're paying, say, 5 cents per kilowatt hour, then like difficulty could double or triple before you're like at that point where you're just getting dollar for dollar value for money spent on electricity versus Bitcoin earned in mining rewards. So, just kind of think about like, if you're paying a lot for electricity, then yeah, it's probably going to matter to you a lot more because you're going to be in a position sooner to be unprofitable and you may not want to be in that position. So, just think about what your electricity costs are, what your goals are. But yeah, I would say to most people that is going to make a difference.
So forgive the ignorance of this question, but we've now talked, setting up your energy and having all those ducks in a row. We've talked what miners that you would recommend based on what your personal needs are. What comes next? Is there anything else other than obviously setting up the actual like software integration with your computer setup at home? But what other steps have just I missed or that we haven't gotten a chance to divulge here?
I think there's a couple of privacy considerations that are important. When we're dealing with mining at home, we're really talking about like three distinct areas. You've got your physical footprint. So that's going to be, what kind of noise can your neighbors hear? If you're running something like a black box in your yard, can people see that from the street or can your neighbors see that? What are you doing with that heat signature? If you're in really close proximity to your neighbors, then, that might be something that they can detect. So you want to think about like physically, what can be seen, what can be heard, and how are you going to manage that to keep it discreet, right? And then we have like the second area is like your on-chain footprint. And so you want to, again, thinking adversarially, like what happens if they start going after mining operators or, mining operators that have received rewards directly from a pool. They know what the pool addresses are, and they can see that those payouts are going to the miners, and then they can follow those payouts on chain. So you want to make considerations about your on-chain privacy. And that's why I make recommendations about Samurai Wallet's Whirlpool, which you can also run on Sparrow Wallet. And the advantage there is that once you mix your mining rewards, then the mining pool can't see where you spend your Bitcoin. And also anyone you go to spend your Bitcoin with, they can't look back on chain and see that your mining rewards came from, or they can't see that your Bitcoin came from mining rewards. So imagine a situation where mining is illegal and you spend your Bitcoin with somebody and they look back on chain and say, oh my God, this is one of those miners. This is one of those criminal miners that we need to report. They could look back on chain and see that you got a mining reward and then report you for that. So I would just be careful of that. And then the last section of the privacy is like you also have a network connection. So there's certain network considerations you should make when you're mining. And I put together a guide, which is published on Bitcoin Magazine, that demonstrates how to mine with a VPN and to do it in such a way that latency doesn't affect your mining rewards. And so the advantage there is that now your internet service provider isn't going to be able to see that you're connecting to a mining pool. They're not going to be able to see what's in your data, in your internet traffic. And then also the mining pool isn't going to be able to look back and see your IP address. So you're kind of protecting yourself from the ISP and the mining pool, just in case either of those become adversaries in the future.
I love it. I also just want to say, like, the articles that you've written are incredible. Like, if for those who are listening who have not gone and read Econoalchemist's article, Home Mining for Non-KYC Bitcoin, the way you break down each of the sections and then go through and you have like photographs, it's absolutely incredible. It is definitely the I would consider to be one of the go-to pieces for understanding the all the considerations that one needs to factor in.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I really appreciated it as well. It was excellent. And I'm going to be dropping in the chat for everyone listening on the stream. I'll send it over to Q or P if you have one more question before we wrap up, basically.
Well, I just wanted to echo, if all three of us don't say it, it's not true, but I cannot say how much I learned from reading Econoalchemist posts, especially Chris, the one that you shared with all of us this morning. I mean, I'm on a mission to get some KYC free Bitcoin, and I'm definitely going to be turning a lot to you. I want to give you the last opportunity to maybe just touch on anything, either that we didn't get to touch on in this conversation, or just, whatever is on your mind as it relates back to the Bitcoin ecosystem amidst a crash in the Bitcoin price as well.
Yeah, I would just say, just really think about what your goals are and think about what your options are. And, check out some of the resources that have been published out there, like my guide. There's plenty of other good guides out there too that will really give you an idea about what it takes to get started mining. And if you've got any questions, jump in a Telegram group like the Home Mining Wizards Telegram channel. Find a good distributor like Upstream Data or Mine Farm Buy or Kaboom Racks, and just get in touch with people that are doing it and check out all the great content on Twitter and Telegram that people are producing to just really kind of start learning about what it takes and if that's a choice that makes sense for you. And, the other thing I would consider too is think about what kind of risks you're taking using KYC services and factor that into your decision as well.
Awesome. Econoalchemist, I cannot thank you enough. We will definitely be bothering you sooner rather than later to come back and continue this conversation around mining at home. Obviously, if you're not following him, give him a follow on Twitter. Where can our audience, what's your Twitter handle? Where can they keep up to date with you?
For sure. Yeah. My Twitter handle's @Econoalchemist. And I've got a blog. I'm actually kind of migrating all my content right now. So I'll give you two. One is econoalchemist.com. And then I've got some other content at econoalchemist.github.io. So you can find some other info there as well.
Another thing that I just want to throw out there is Econoalchemist, thank you so much for joining us on the stage at Bitcoin 2022. For listeners, if you haven't watched the home mining Bitcoin panel that Econoalchemist participated in, you should go watch that as well. It does a really good job with Odell of covering at a higher level, I would say, definitely than the article that we just mentioned, but it's a really good job of covering a lot of the issues involved and some of the broader things to consider.
Oh, and on that note, on Wednesday, the day after tomorrow, I'll be in Nashville for the Bitcoin meetup. So I'll be there with Odell and Ronan Miner and Denver Bitcoin doing a home mining panel. So if anyone's in the area, come say what's up.
Can't wait to see you.
Cool.
One last thing, just because, P, you to the show, Econoalchemist, it's been awesome having you as a guest that I hope will return. Chris and I like to do a thing, and full disclosure, this is going to lead to some KYC Bitcoin. So I can understand if you bow out of this, but we love to do an impromptu stack some stats in the middle of an episode from time to time. So I have my Strike app open. Shout out Papa Jack. Feel free to sponsor the show. You're not yet a sponsor, but one day. And I'm going to smash by just, quick $100 of fiat. If anyone feels like joining me, let's go through. Yeah. Boom.
100%.
So smash that by, stack some sats. We got some sats on state. Ugh. Too many S noises for me to continue that, but it's on sale. Just buy some Bitcoin, guys. Don't worry about the price so much. And as always, stay humble while we do this. No one likes an asshole. We're going to cut to a quick commercial break, though, and we're going to be joined by market analyst Sam Rule to really break down what is going on with the Bitcoin price action. You're not going to want to miss that. Stick around through the commercial break. And as always, use promo code FOMO and get 10% off anything in the Bitcoin Magazine store.
All right, we're back live on YouTube. How's it going, everyone? We're just getting Twitter Spaces all lined up. We're bringing Sam Rule in here to do market analysts about the Bitcoin price. So hold with us for a minute here.
What's up, everybody? Also here to discuss Bukele's recent purchase of 500 more Bitcoin. That's if I'm remembering right, they haven't bought Bitcoin for a minute, but it's normal purchase orders of 300 Bitcoin or less. This might be one of the bigger buys since first adopting Bitcoin coming out of El Salvador.
I love this. I mean, I was genuinely thinking just the other day, like, why haven't they stepped in to buy any more Bitcoin? I think it shows the conviction of them, shows it off of the heels of all these different IMF attacks, first to El Salvador, then to the Central African Republic, and then most recently with the bullshit that they're doing down in Argentina. This is a great message and signal that Bukele is sending both to the Bitcoin ecosystem at large, as well as the IMF. So I think it is very important, and the timing of this is great, but I'm going to stop talking because we are joined, well, not yet here on Zoom. Sam, I know you're here in Spaces. Get on the Zoom. But also, like, while I have you, this is what happens when you don't respond to my messages on Twitter. I then request that you just make an impromptu appearance on live so that I can ask the same questions that I tweeted at you. But we do want to see your face as well. We have pinned to the top the link to join us on YouTube for everyone who is listening in on the Twitter Spaces. Give us a moment, and then once Sam gets here, we're going to dive right into all the charts that he's been staring at all day. P, I'd love for you to, or Alex, sorry, go ahead.
What are you tossing to me exactly? What's up? Go ahead, Q.
I totally thought you were raising your hand. That's my beat. I want to let P now comment on Bukele and El Salvador.
Yeah, well, actually, what I was going to ask is going to direct a question at Sam and just say, at what price should I sell my second kidney in order to buy more Bitcoin? That's really what I want to know. Yeah, help me out, bro.
I'm considering selling the car.
No. Yeah, I'm 5x leverage long Bitcoin, and one of those X's is one of my kidneys, and I want to increase the X's by an additional one. So, what do you think?
I mean, now is not a bad time to like slowly accumulate your kidney into Bitcoin. We probably got further down to go.
Nah.
But if you're looking for like a strong bottom price, who knows? It looks like anywhere between like the 25 to 30K range could hold up here. We got realized price at like 24,000. It's always been like a generational bet. And then, kind of like 20 to 24 is probably like maximum pain capitulation bottom coming in. So I've been wanting to back up the truck as much as possible and load up on Bitcoin if we get to see some prices in the 20s. So we're getting close. I worry now that like basically you're looking for a bottom in equities. So I still think we've got some room and some volatility to go there. And it's been crazy to see, especially with everything going on with Terra and Luna, to see Bitcoin already hit 30K today is much faster than I expected.
Can you elaborate what you mean? What's going on with Terra and Luna?
Yeah, so sure. So I'm no expert on this, and I'm always trying to like get my research game up on like trying to understand basically between Terra and Luna, like this algorithmic stable coin launched by Do Kwon. They have the Luna Foundation Guard, and essentially, the stable coin experiment to try and, algorithmically back this Terra peg to like a US dollar. And, with minting and burning of Luna, this altcoin to be a huge part of that, which has had a huge speculative rise of, why some of this has been steady. But more recently, the Luna Foundation Guard, which is kind of like a smaller council of people who are closely connected to the project, have been they bought, over 42,000 Bitcoin, which, anywhere between $2 to $3 billion in prices there. And so basically what happens, and this is, not all the details, but basically when the peg of Terra goes away from the US dollar. So earlier today I was trading at like 98 cents. Essentially there's an arbitrage trade there that is expected in the market in these times where people come in and they bid the price of Terra back up to $1 and they make kind of money on that spread. But in like real severe times, the Luna Foundational Guard has taken out all of these Bitcoin reserves. So when Terra really sells off, when the peg gets really out of whack, they basically have these reserves just in case to sell back into the market to stabilize Terra. And so right now, that dollar peg has gone down to like 93 cents. They've had what seems to be a lot of like external partners or people, with invested interest into the project and making money off Luna and Terra come in and try to provide some liquidity in the markets to, defend the Terra peg, get it back up. But it's selling off incredibly hard today. But basically they have this document that says, if we need to sell Bitcoin into that market to defend the Terra peg, we'll do it. And so that's how it relates to Bitcoin. Essentially, they've been the largest buyer of Bitcoin over the last 2 months, and maybe one of those big buyers that have kept Bitcoin from, not performing as worse as some of the equity drawdowns we've seen year to date. So currently, right now, I haven't gotten to verify it. I've seen a lot of messages coming out about a lot of Bitcoin in their balance moving in their wallet right now. So I'm not sure if they're starting to deploy that capital, sell some of that Bitcoin, but that's essentially the next step if the Terra peg stays way off of what the dollar peg is.
Sam, I also want to ask, like, I don't want to detract from the Terra stuff. Like, that's to a degree terrifying. We saw Do Kwon send out a tweet essentially saying that they are going to be deploying some more capital as well. I want to switch the gears though to MicroStrategy. And where does MicroStrategy sort of leverage buy as well as accumulation strategy fit into this entire equation of the Bitcoin price crashing right now?
Yeah, it's a totally interesting one in the sense that I had tweeted out some levels from like their earnings announcements last week of saying like, you have all these on-chain levels, talking about it before, you have like on-chain cost basis, you have realized price, which is that on-chain cost basis of the entire network. But MicroStrategy's basically cost basis right now is at like 30,700. So they're at net, just below, getting underwater in terms of everything that they bought. Now, a lot of their debt that they have, it's starting to trade higher in terms of the interest rates on that debt. A lot of that debt spans out to like 2027. So in terms of like, I think they have over $2 billion in debt that they've largely taken out to buy Bitcoin at some interest rate. And it's strategically taken for it to be a cycle away to give them time for Bitcoin to appreciate, to be able to pay that off. But the other piece is that they have like a short-term debt bill that's, I think it's about 205 million that they just took on from Silvergate loan. And essentially it's to buy more Bitcoin, but that does have like a rough margin call price. I think they associated that being like 21,000 is the price for them, where like the margin call comes in. Now they have like 94,000 Bitcoin unencumbered on their balance sheet, able to deploy if needed into basically that shorter term debt. But it starts to get, I mean, in terms of how the market is pricing it, I think they're seeing MicroStrategy start to be like an incredibly like a lot of a riskier option on Bitcoin, and like this kind of Bitcoin call option type. I don't have access to some of the credit default spreads, but those are rising with the interest rate on their debt has been rising in terms of what they owe in 2027. And people are a little bit more cautious, I think, about their revenues and their cash flows that they're making in terms of the interest payments on their debt. So as this Bitcoin price lowers, I think the market itself just starts to see MicroStrategy as a much more riskier option for like a Bitcoin investment vehicle, and they start to become more worried about the repayment back on some of those interest rate debts in the future. So it will be curious to see, obviously Saylor's committed to saying like, we're never selling our Bitcoin and, wanting to go down with the ship if needed. But as we get to some of these other levels, which I don't think, like if we visit some of these like lower 20 levels, you're talking about like the margin call areas, I don't think will exist there for long. It'll be interesting to see if they need, for capital purposes, just cash flow in general, need to sell any of their Bitcoin when we get lower. But yeah, essentially, like I think the micro strategy, this like cost basis is they own just under 1% of the network, so it becomes like a pretty interesting critical level if they're able, if MicroStrategy did have the scenario of them going under.
So Sam, just quick, like talking strategy. Let's say you're feeling bearish about, maybe the next 2 years up to the next halving. If we're gonna follow like a super cycle theory, if someone's trying to, I don't know, like collateralize or go use leverage to go longer on Bitcoin. I mean, not official financial advice, but like, what's the move here? You wait for it to drop even lower. You get in now. Like, what do they do?
Yeah, sure. So I think the safest bet is to probably watch this play out, right? You don't ever want to catch like a falling knife in markets. And honestly, I was surprised to see all of markets already hitting this with only like one Fed rate hike already playing out. Like we're already in like a tightening cycle that's going to continue to play out over the next few months. So I would say give it time, let support kind of play out on the market and find these prices. It's and a long-term strategy, like you're saying, Bitcoin back down to 30,000. I mean, every on-chain analytics metric, every kind of like stronger cyclical metric would tell you that 4 or 5 years from now, like as Preston Fish would say, like just fall asleep, close your eyes, wake up in 5 years, and see what Bitcoin does. I mean, you're getting a huge accumulation zone here for a lot of people, but that it definitely can go worse because I don't think we've seen like a credit unwind. So you want to look, and we talk about this all the time, like these rising credit spreads that are happening, like debt levels for corporations that are above treasury rate levels, that it kind of explode up in terms of like real big credit unwinds. And also like the VIX is an easy thing to watch. We're talking about there's going to be more volatility in the market. So want to see some of those like explode up, see like more of a capitulation happen. And then you want to see some like good support in like accumulation buying zone around there, right? Like it might be more pain for someone to say like, oh, I think 30K is the bottom, and then we revisit, 20 for like a short period of time and we come right back up, would be a good sign that like, hey, we're bouncing off that. So in terms of like collateralization, or like if you want to take on a little bit of leverage, I was just looking at like some unchained capital rates myself. I'm like 3-year kind of rates of saying like what's interesting in terms of like how much you would pay on like, I think on a 3-year rate, you're paying like 14% interest and you're paying like the lump sum at the end of maturity. So even if you're saying like, okay, price could extend into a bear market for like 1 or 2 years, what is the like time frame do I think, like if it's a 3-year time frame, do you think you're going to be able to outpace like 14% in interest? So I would just tell people, wait for like legacy markets to look for kind of bottoms in there and like real capitulation events and pain. I don't think this is it yet. I hope I'm wrong. I hope like 28 to 30K is really defended. But this has already happened so much in just one day into the week. So I think we've got some more to go.
Sam, I need to ask the question now. So we have talked a lot. I've asked you guys so many times to the point where I know how annoying it is about the correlation between the NASDAQ and Bitcoin. Something that I personally have noticed when I sort of charted out between the two is the Bitcoin seems to be some sort of a leading indicator to the NASDAQ. Bitcoin peaks and then all of a sudden the NASDAQ peaks shortly after. Bitcoin bottoms or makes a new short-term low, all of a sudden the NASDAQ is making a new short-term low. Like, where does that sort of trading pattern that we've now seen pretty consistently since November fit into the future of where we can maybe be looking for a bottom? I'm not asking for financial advice. I'm more just trying to set expectations appropriately. I'm personally looking for Bitcoin to make a bottom first. Do you maybe buy that hypothesis, or do you buy something else?
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. And only because you ask the question all the time, but it is a good question to ask. And I just honestly tweeted out another chart about Bitcoin and the NASDAQ today, about them tracking pretty much one for one since November. There's some other tech stock indexes that are a little bit more risk appetite on that track like Bitcoin. But I think you're totally right in the hypothesis. That's how I think of it, right? Like Bitcoin is much smaller market, but it's this 24/7 hour market. And it's probably the most free market that we have. And if you're going to see risk and appetite sell off, you're going to see that sell off first and get out of positions and capitulation in Bitcoin versus like some other, higher regulation, tougher entry exit kind of vehicles in finance, like the NASDAQ or other high level indexes, or maybe some particular stocks. So I still buy that we'll see like probably the bottom in Bitcoin for just like, let's say risk on or equity markets first, or like major capitulations, like what we saw in like the March 2020 COVID crash. And like, that's a good example to go back and just say like, this is what like real capitulation and pain can look like really fast. Like I think we've gotten something like a little bit more of a gradual sell-off. But those type of moves, when you see like just the past day, I mean, today is probably another 9% move down. We just had another like 2 days ago, or like right before the weekend, I think on Thursday or Friday, another 8% move down. And we've seen a lot more larger capitulation moves just over the last 6 months. We've seen Bitcoin move 10, 12, 14, 15% in a day. And some of those are really driven by like the perpetual swaps market, the futures markets, which will have an impact, maybe not as much as those times. They're getting a lot more, efficient and experienced in those markets. But the capitulation moves are seeing in like these smaller day changes are pretty small relative in context to what we've seen before. So I'm looking for like some more capitulation type moves like that. I'm looking at like how well 28K has been like this level where there's like a lot of stops built up for Bitcoin. 30K has been this huge support. I think what's really interesting about this time around for Bitcoin is like you have all of these investors, people, holders like us, and even higher institution ones that are like looking for the discount price that they can get for Bitcoin over like a 5-year time frame. Where as before, I think it's just capitulation at all ends, get out of, rush to cash. And I still think that is the case, but you have more players that are saying, okay, well, if we even get close to like a 25, 28K, I'm, incredibly going, whether it's irresponsibly long or opening up huge positions because it's kind of the once in a cycle chance that you're going to get.
I'm also curious your thoughts. So this correlation, it seems to be more recent, especially you bring up like the November chart, which is also pinned at the very top. And a reminder for everyone who's on Twitter Spaces, we are live on YouTube as well. The very last tweet, if you scroll all the way to the right, gives you a link to join us over on YouTube. But I saw this tweet over the weekend, and I have both the NASDAQ and Bitcoin charts up right now. And it looks like based on price levels, historically speaking, the NASDAQ has now reached price levels that it saw and was trading at in like November of 2020. They're essentially back down to like 2020 levels. Meanwhile, Bitcoin still holds above that 28,000 level that I have treated as some sort of a like fake level of psychological support that until it's broken, I will trade as such. What merit, if anything, does the fact that the NASDAQ is essentially reaching levels it was at 18 months ago, roughly, versus Bitcoin still holding above that 28,000 marker? What credence, what does it give us in our argument against the general stock market?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say that's generally like, although that Bitcoin has this relationship and has been getting forced down and has been selling off and has that correlation, you've seen it find strength at the same time. And, we can use some of the on-chain data to say, hey, look, like just from a long-term holder perspective and the way we cut that data, you would expect a lot more, sell-off in this. It is one of those assets that it just has the conviction of what people look at it as like a long-term view of an asset. And it's not so much like, what do you want to hold for what are you most confident in the next 20 years and you want to hold? Do you want to hold the NASDAQ 100, or do you want to hold this asset in 1.5% adoption, 2%, whatever you call it, that's going through its monetization phase that has proven every 4 or 5 year cycles that it's going to be, significant factors above what it was before. So I think that is really at the end of the day of like, that's some of the fundamentals and like the network growth that's in Bitcoin that is like the promising point of that's holding up strength and why people want to own it for the next 10 years. And so I can't say that much for like a particular stock right now. Maybe people are bullish on individual stocks, but like tech as a whole, I think has been just seen as this speculative bubble, liquidity bubble, like ready to be popped for like quite a long time, like overvaluations. And so I think it's harder to pick companies within that you think are going to be the strongest over 10 years, where Bitcoin already has that kind of like conviction. It's growing that investor base, it's growing that adoption. So I think that's where you're seeing some of the strength and where it's holding up. In terms of like the levels, if you're looking at like the SPX or the NASDAQ, obviously like looking at a good case study of like where the Fed put was last time, like where did, extensive monetary and fiscal stimulus come out? And it's like, you have those COVID like crash levels essentially right in that March 2020 timeframe of like right after that like recovery, like right before it crashed. That's essentially kind of like levels you might be looking at for like a really low bottom in terms of equities. So still expect Bitcoin to follow that, but like to your point, I expect it to hold some strength too. And it really all depends on like where do people just unload the truck and buy at? Is that at 20K, 25K, 28K? Hard to say right now. Like all of those are interesting, like support areas. Like 30K, 28K has been like such a prominent support area in the past, and where a lot of interest is right now too.
All right, so if we just do a quick temperature check and just go around everybody on the stream, like how low do you think it's gonna go this cycle, and what makes you uncomfortable? I guess I proposed the question, so I'll say I think 20K easy. It would be very interesting to see again. You think lower, Q? Q's shaking his head.
You, I think, excuse me. You, I think, shares my response, which is you fucking bear.
Yeah, fair.
I will admit, I kind of take P side of this. I think 20K is too low. I know, Sam, you're going to be the last to answer this, but like in the tweet that we have pinned to the top, you highlight that 20K is a possibility because that's that 80% drawdown based on previous cycles. I buy into 28K being the floor from the psychological standpoint. The psychological standpoint is literally just all these technical indicators that like I love to use and bring up. They weren't formed for the stock market. They were actually formed in trading rice in Japan back in like the 1600s. And like they were trying to essentially trade the price of rice based on what they anticipated the future cost or whatever would be. And it was all rooted in human psychology. And that translated over to the stock market. And I genuinely believe people's psychology, when they see that 28,000 number, where a lot of people kept smash buying, where it's been a consistent level of support. And I believe at this point now, if it goes down and touches 28K, that'll be 9 times that it's used that as support. On the flip side of it, though, if we go under that, like you ask, what am I afraid of? I am afraid of below 28K. My personal hypothesis and my personal thesis get completely thrown out the door, and I have to remap a lot of things. So maybe I'm a little lazy, but I don't want to do that. So 28K.
Well, that's like a function of you trying to predict what Bitcoin will do. But I mean, are you scared on a protocol layer? I mean, what's wrong with it going? For me, it doesn't matter where the price is. I don't think I don't think I'd start to get really worried unless it went to like a historic price that I haven't seen in my time in Bitcoin.
Dude, to be honest, like Bitcoin can go down to $1,000 and I will like be happy and excited. The price isn't what worries me. It's now the barrier above to like regrow that price level, because when you have like, again, I'm just coming at it from the angle of like understanding technical analysis. And when you have a level of support that is so well entrenched, which is essentially a signal that every single time went down to 28K, there were an amass amount of buyers coming in to push the price up. So that's their realized price individually. Psychologically speaking, the moment that they're now a group of people who have always been in the black, once they go into the red, psychologically, that's when you have overhead supply. And now all of a sudden you reintroduce a new psychological limit, which is these people don't care about getting back in the black. They just want to get even. And so that means that the moments we get back to 28K, you'll start to see potentially selling increase, based on this psychological aspect of this type of technical indicator. So that's where my nerves come in from a protocol level. No, like so long as there's no attack on Bitcoin and so long as no one has double spent their Bitcoin, there's nothing to be worried about longer term. It's more about timing things. That's what I'm more concerned about. Like,
so how do you consider this a type of attack on Bitcoin? Is this a psychological attack on Bitcoin?
Wait, what? Come on. Y'all are out of your minds. We are going to be totally fine. If we go down to 28K, which again, I said this earlier, I maintain my previous prediction. I have been saying 500K by conference day. Again, that was Bitcoin 2022. I think it's still in play. We could still invent time travel, go back in time and hit 500K before April 6th. But all joking aside, I mean, this is not a threat to the protocol. This is a price dip. I mean, this year has been historic in terms of the Bitcoin price action. It's also been historic in terms of the broader markets. Like we are seeing, these are the craziest fucking times in modern history, in my opinion, certainly from a monetary perspective. Something like 80% of all the US dollars that have ever existed have been printed since 2008. That is insane. And I think that this is all totally fine. As I said earlier, I already sold my second kidney in order to get more Bitcoin. I'm about to sell my third kidney and also my left foot. I don't need it. What I need is more Bitcoin. And I challenge all of you to embrace that, aesthetic as well.
100%. Love it. Had any fiat left, who would be buying, right, Q? Well, Q wants to go into mining right now. Is this, Sam, what do you think? Is this a good time to go into Bitcoin mining?
Wait, Sam, no, don't answer that. Answer the question of the roundtable. What is the price?
Yeah, so I like P's point of like, this is really unprecedented times, just from like, not just a Bitcoin market perspective, but like a macroeconomic regime shifting, totally different than what we've seen over the last 10 to 12 years. And I think that's been tough for people to like look at that reversal. It's been dynamic. We've been talking about for months, like a giant credit unwinding in the face of what we've had in terms of like QE and fiscal monetary stimulus over the 10 years is going to be devastating. And like a lot of the growth outlooks are declining with it across so many different regions around the world. So what I would say is like, I'm preparing for a price that gets to that 20 to 25K range. And that's like dipping below the realized cost basis of the network. That's what we've seen multiple times happen through cycles. Those have marked generational buying opportunities, the best times to accumulate. I'm preparing for that. I am interested to see, I think a lot of people are preparing like for that scenario, or you might want to be if you're not. But because so many people are preparing for that, when you get something to like 28K, which would be, let's say another 10% down from here, I think probably like SPX has another maybe 10, 15, 20% down to go as well. And maybe Bitcoin's been hit like harder through the worst. So when you get to that 28K, there's going to be a lot of interest and demand, even if that's not the bottom. So like we might see a lot of accumulation 28K. We might see price temporarily go to 20, 25K, but it won't last long. I mean, at the end of the day, whether you're buying like 20, 25K, 28K in 5 years time, it's really not going to matter or make a lot of the difference. So just like I don't see it going below 20K, and I don't see it going below realized price 24K for long. So those are kind of the worst case scenarios I'm preparing for.
Because you're on the show now, Sam, I get to ask you. So what is the technical indicator of like all the realized price short-term? Like I know those levels are above us right now, but is there an indicator trailing us that is trading at that 20,000 level? Or is the closest thing I believe you posted it, realized price at 24K? Is that the lowest indicator we have?
From an on-chain perspective, like realized price is like the lowest like there. And you could even look at some previous cycles of like when price went below that. So you could say maybe like, okay, 10% realized price is what you should be looking at based on like how psychologically these capitulation bottoms have performed in the past. Another interesting one, we posted this in our like monthly report. This is by Charles Edwards, but he has a Bitcoin production cost. It's like the baseline electricity cost not the business cost for mining. And right now that's at like 23,000. So that's probably even a little bit closer. And that's like your like baseline electricity miner capitulation, not including like business cost, fixed costs associated with that. So that's just from like an energy and like network dynamic. That's also an interesting level as well.
Just a quick reminder for everyone on Twitter Spaces, we are also live on YouTube. The link is pinned to the very top, and we are not going to be inviting people to come onto the stage, so apologies for that. But feel free to bombard Sam's Twitter DMs and inbox with all of the questions that you might have and all the free Bitcoin that you're offering. Just offer it to Sam specifically. I want to now ask you, Sam, broadening the scope, but specifically now in the stock market, Bitcoin miners all over the place. We have the Bitcoin, a couple of different ETFs, if you will, with the We're Going to Make It ETF, and we have some future stuff, GBTC. Any of these sort of products, if you will, that are offered in the stock market, are any of them catching your eyes right now? Are you looking at miners maybe to have a nice extra volatility swing here?
Yeah, I mean, I think we put out in like our previous mining pieces of just like pricing miners in Bitcoin, whether you're looking at like a dollar value or Bitcoin, whatever your unit account is, like they're all hitting like I think even Core Scientific is hitting its all-time low today. All of them are hitting like ridiculously these huge lows that have been seen, in years since some of these have been traded. So I think, yeah, there is some upside here. I mean, if you're comfortable with like the MicroStrategy debt position there, that's kind of like a long like punt, like call option that can have like higher exposure on Bitcoin. I still think there's more to go though. So I would be cautious to like load up on Bitcoin miners. Maybe you average into a position as it goes further if you want to get like more upside exposure there. Basically, looking at like North American miners with like a lot of infrastructure that are going to be around for like the next 5-6 years, that are basically going to weather whatever liquidity crunch and valuation that comes at them now. And then just from like a mining perspective of whether you're not buying miners, but you're buying rigs, you're starting to see like rig prices, they're going to tank down with Bitcoin prices. They're going to start hitting like post-China ban lows in terms of those. I think that's, fortunately where I got one of my first mining rigs. So that's a time to start like thinking of when the rig price is so low and, you're expecting a different type of return in Bitcoin over the next few years, and you get a decent electricity price of kind of loading up on rigs, just taking really advantage of the capitulation. But again, I'd be cautious until we see like a lot more durable bottom in equities and stocks. Some of those are looking surprisingly pretty good. But mining stocks, they in like bearish times, they're worse performers of Bitcoin, and then like in bullish times, they're much better performers. So it is really all about timing. And I probably personally would not be taking on any positions for, or large lump sum positions for maybe another couple months seeing this play out.
Sorry, I'm unsending all the texts to people. I said back the dump trucks up. Give me a moment. But in all seriousness, like in times like this, we're all still dollar cost averaging. I know a lot of people are buying the dip and doing bulk purchases. Sam, do you mind divulging a little bit of sort of what's your strategy to accumulate as much as possible during this opportunity?
For sure. So I would say DCA is the best for most, has been proven to do so, kind of like buy all the way down, average in. And then essentially, like if you've been raising cash over the few months, like putting in a lump sum of like what you think is like a bottom, like coming your way, or where you get that, or like some support on that. And then I think people that are comfortable with it and want to take the risk and see the upside of like taking a small percent of your portfolio to some leverage kind of position, whether you're using your Bitcoin as collateral and grabbing USD on top of that. I think you just have to be cautious and cognizant of like how much you're taking on and what percent of like your portfolio that is, and how comfortable you are in managing your cash flows. So that's generally, I don't think you have to like really outsmart these bottoms. These happen all the time. They've happened through cycles. It's really time that is going to solve through like an adoption phase here. So I would say most people, unless you're trying to like actively trade and do this, like still DCAing, and then whatever cash you have, kind of lump summing that in what you think might be a good bottom.
If I can just jump in, I think one of the things that is so important here, and just in general, is never putting yourself in a position where you might have to sell Bitcoin in order to fund a short-term emergency or something like that. So one should always have an emergency fund, credit available, whatever it takes. Like, do not go, I joke about like selling a third kidney. Don't do that. Don't get a sixth mortgage on your second house. Put yourself in a situation where you aren't going to have to get liquidated at at a bottom that's $100 less than the one that you thought was going to come in.
Yeah, I would agree with that in terms of leverage, but I think there's people out there that are living completely on Bitcoin, that can be your emergency fund. You know what I'm saying?
Alex, please feel free to fully counter P's argument, because I know that you quite possibly are the perfect antithesis to what P is saying.
Hit me with it.
Well, I don't really need to counter. I mean, I agree with you. Don't YOLO or like FOMO into some weird leverage position. Don't take on debt that you've never had any experience taking on. Like, do your due diligence, take your time, make careful. This is not the time for hasty decisions. I think if you're going to make a hasty decision, just buy some Bitcoin, but don't buy so much that you can't, function your day-to-day life, whatever that means to you. I'm just saying that if you're living kind of a Bitcoin only lifestyle, that is my emergency sovereign wealth fund. And sometimes I don't know. There are times when some people sell Bitcoin. I don't think that's such a terrible thing. But yeah, the strategy is definitely accumulate and hold for years, because the current tax law in the United States is structured in such a way that you should buy Bitcoin and hold it forever. There's no reason to sell it and get that capital gains tax.
Sam, I'd love your thoughts, just, going back to what we're seeing in the market, and maybe, I know this is more speculative than anything, not rooted in fact, more your opinion, but what are you attributing this current downturn that we're seeing to? Is there anything in particular that's maybe triggering, whether it's in the stock market or Bitcoin specifically?
Yeah, I would say largely like the framework I use that from understanding of like that this has been coming, that this has been as like rates are rising across the board. So interest rates everywhere for essentially equity and larger like financing costs abroad and this is like a result of essentially a bubble that has been meant to pop for a long time, a lot of like easy credit impulse that we've seen. And now we're starting to see rates probably have some of the fastest rate of change that we've ever seen before. Like if you're looking at like mortgage rates is a great example of that. To look at that rate of change, you're looking at the whole treasury curve since November has been flying up. You're looking at essentially just a tightening liquidity in markets that is some of the fastest tightening liquidity just in terms of rate hikes and interest rates moves that we've seen. And so now essentially this relates to, okay, all of this debt and credit in the system, that whether people have been rolling it over or relying it on or having these low rates and servicing whatever they've been servicing with this credit, it's all going away and it's all fleeting. And it also comes at a time too where post COVID, we haven't had this kind of growth impulse that we've expected. Maybe the recovery and the stimulus went, a decent amount of ways, but we essentially need more to keep the growth story going and to continue. And so when you have like these tightening liquidity cycles, these rates rising at like historically fast paces, you had some exogenous shocks in the supply chain as well, which makes inflation even worse. Essentially, you have this cocktail of monetary, fiscal, economic regimes coming together that anytime you backtest this across any assets, it's not a pretty picture. And 2022 has been, shaping up to be this for like 4 or 5 months. So in terms of this particular day, I think it's hard to say like when those unwind days happen and when they're going to happen, but it's certainly as an effect of everyone is still highly positioned and bullish. You're still seeing like ARC inflows, Kathy Wood's fund, like still seeing fund inflows into ARC over like the last 12 weeks. And so you're still seeing that there's some risk appetite by the dip mentality there. And I think this is just like a larger credit unwinding at play that everything is affected by. But that said, I do think I have to run. I got some other things to take care of today, but really appreciate you guys having me on. And let me share some thoughts.
Thanks, Sam.
I feel like you're like, I gotta go, and then you're just like immediately gonna like turn to the right and be like, bye, bye, bye.
See you guys.
Adios.
Well, guys, there you have it from the market analyst's mouth himself, Sam Roll. Let's go around just the four of us who are still here. Like, we'll start P with you. Like, what are your thoughts? How are you feeling? To be honest, like Sam sounds even more bearish than I should be, and I don't know. I want you guys to answer this, and then I'm going to answer. By the way, I'm not going to use Alex's. I'll go first because I presented the question logic.
All right. I mean, just thinking back to how everybody reacted and felt when we were going down, however many months it was ago, so long ago, 9 months when we were, testing 33. I think these moments, they happen regularly. And this is certainly a historic run in terms of the Bitcoin price. But as much as we like to talk about, Bitcoin as an alternative asset, that narrative has gotten dimmer because Bitcoin is tied to the broader markets, right? People that are investing in Bitcoin are still managing, the majority of them, their capital inflows and outflows and their other investments. And so when you see the broader markets tank like this, it is not a surprise to me at all that Bitcoin is also seeing, we're seeing the same thing in Bitcoin as we did in, March of 2020. So for me, it's like, oh yeah, it sucks to see one's, net worth get halved. At the same time, I'm buying more Bitcoin. So I don't see this as an existential crisis. I'm not freaking out. We're going to make it.
100%. Yeah, I agree with that. I like playing the bear just for the bear's sake recently, but I love it, man. I love using these opportunities to try to get some really relatively cheap sats. But I remember stacking at this price on the way up over the last year and a half. When was it? 2020, the first time we crossed this, the very end of 2020. And I wouldn't sweat if we were back in the teens, man. I'd love that opportunity. This is really make or break for some people. This is a generational wealth opportunity in terms of acquiring Bitcoin. Like if you think about it, if the average American makes between, 20 and 30K a year, this is an opportunity to really get a good proportion of a Bitcoin. Not that one, or multiple Bitcoin has to be the goal, but it sure is nice. It's a nice way to think about it. I think every American can work towards that.
Yeah, I think, this is where strong hands are made, right? When you're getting punched in the mouth, do you lay down or do you get back up? And I think this is kind of when everyone talks the big game, when things are going up and up and up. But this is what we always talk about, the price potentially going down. So I think strong hands, keep buying. If you liked it at 69K, you should love it at 30K, 32K, whatever it's right now. To Q's point, the protocol, and even Alex and P and me, myself, like the protocol hasn't changed, or at least not to my knowledge. Maybe something slipped through that we missed, but aside from that,
did we get that BIP? Do we signal for that BIP while we weren't paying attention?
No, I don't think that's come through yet, but that's still point of contention for the summer. So that'll be when we get punched in the mouth again. But no, like I said, there's still 21 million Bitcoin, or at least that's what my node's reading right now. That hasn't changed, and blocks are still coming in every 10 minutes. So just keep buying the dip. And I think to Q and Alex's point as well, like you don't want to put yourself in a position that over leverages yourself, that you're being forced to sell at the exact worst time. Like you want to put yourself in a safe spot that you're not being forced to sell Bitcoin in order to, can sustain your life. That's how you get wiped out. And that's what you want to avoid.
I think just by like sheer volume of people that we see kind of joining this chat just to figure out what's happening with the Bitcoin crashing, there's probably a lot of new people to Bitcoin. And it's like, This is a great learning opportunity, but I really can't emphasize enough. Think hard before moving any amount of Bitcoin. Make sure you're in kind of a stable, lucid, sober state of mind. Don't get too panicked. Don't make any hasty decisions. I think that's a great takeaway, because this kind of thing happens often. This isn't some terrible event, and you're going to experience more of them. Volatility and in US dollar terms is just part of the ride. So I would say keep chipping away at your self custody and security solutions, and keep buying if you can.
Oh, yeah. Look, we're in this generational buying opportunity. I'm viewing it like right now. And the reason I am is because at this point, pretty much any price below 33K, you're looking at 100K Bitcoin being a 3x. You're looking at $1 million Bitcoin being a 30x. Like, you're starting to see an opportunity to have and cement your and your family's place for the rest of your life with the right conviction and the right amount of patience. And I think those are the two things that matter above all else. It's how convicted are you and how patient, how long are you willing to wait for the payout? Like, I think having, like, Alex, you brought up a really good point, but having just this idea or notion of like the tax hurdle here in America, where if you sell your Bitcoin that you've held for less than a year, you have short-term realized gain tax or short-term taxes to pay. And that's a much steeper tax bracket than long-term holding uh, instigates. And that doesn't kick in until you hold some sort of an asset for a minimum of 12 months. So having that conviction to, hold for at least a year. And then as you hold for a year, like learning more about both the technology and how and why the price moves the way it moves. Like, it's not a steady S, it's a lot of zigzagging up and down until we finally get to the place where those zags start to get muted more and more. Look, we could genuinely go back below 10K. Like, that's within the realm of possibility. I think what's very interesting to me during all of this is how we are further seeing the correlation with the equities markets. And that's signaling to me personally that there's going to be this weird opportunity that the Fed could very well provide all of us Bitcoiners, in that when they reopen quantitative easing and they go back to having 0% interest rates, and all of a sudden the tech bubble reignites and the NASDAQ is going back to new all-time highs, well, my expectations will be fully that Bitcoin will also make new all-time highs the moment the Fed returns to the market. Mind you, Fed is in the market. They are just slowly cutting back how much money they're putting in, as well as raising interest rates in real time. And these two things are definitely impacting the way the public markets are trading. And as a byproduct, I believe Bitcoin has and will continue to trade in tandem for the foreseeable future.
I think it's an awful lot of fiat. That's an awful lot of fiat. And how do you queue as usual? No, I'm just joking, but I do hesitate to join the price streams and the price analysis streams for the simple reason that I think you shouldn't, like, when your Bitcoin kind of stacking goals are achieved or whatever, you probably shouldn't even be thinking in US dollar terms. Like, it shouldn't matter. You hopefully won't have a tax obligation, because I think that you'll find, yourself sovereign from the system, or so wealthy that you've got other solutions at your disposal. I mean, I really don't think, in the beginning, it's surely exciting to think about the US dollar price and how much can your wealth kind of like double and triple if Bitcoin hits this number or that number. But I think when you think in those terms, you're kind of priming yourselves to trade out of like the greatest sovereign property that you'll ever own. So I don't know. I've just noticed that along my journey, I kind of tend to think less and less in those terms, and think more and more of like, how many Bitcoin do I have, and how do I continuously upgrade my security? And where do I get my third passport? And, how am I going to get out from under the thumb of the US government, kind of tax regime?
You're not wrong. I'll give you that much. I'm curious, and I'll present this to everyone again as well. But what is something that you're keeping an eye on to trigger the upside from this point forward, if anything, or if you're just along for the ride, up or down?
I think you hit the nail on the head, right? The Bitcoin before Bitcoin, it was gold, and even like during March 2020, you saw the same thing with gold, right? Gold was the first thing or one of the first things to crash down. Bitcoin as well, and then as soon as the Fed stepped back in, it was just like meteoric rise, right? And it dipped faster than everything else, and it recovered faster than everything else. So for me, there's no way the Fed is not going to step in, right? We are in the last stages, which will probably go on for decades, of the American hegemony kind of collapsing. And everyone is incentivized to just keep the party going as long as possible. So the Fed, they will invent new ways of stimulating the economy, just as they did in March 2020, right? They were like, they dropped Bitcoin, Bitcoin rates. They dropped, the rates, and then they were like, all right, well, they invented this word salad of other acronyms and systems in order to inject liquidity and money into the economy, and they'll do that again. And so as soon as that starts to happen, things like Bitcoin will recover just faster than you can blink, which is why for me, I honestly don't try to time the market. I used to do that kind of stuff, and I learned very quickly that it's better just to DCA and just buy when one is able.
Yeah, I think that's sound advice in any case. Just keep dollar cost averaging. Just buy. The only timing of the market really that I like to get cute with is like, what part of the day do I think will be the lowest? But other than that, it's kind of a day-to-day endeavor.
All right, I'm gonna keep being a fiat jackass, and I'm gonna try to time this so perfectly. And I can't wait for like one of my random like $5 every hour purchases to be like the bottom, and my $100 smash buys are like a $5,000 smash buy just being nowhere near that bottom. But until then, I'm gonna believe that I can do this. Chris, I want to give you the opportunity as well to chime in and maybe just talk a little bit about from an investing standpoint, so that someone else can also talk fiat terms with me here for the other noobs out there listening or trying to learn. What are you paying attention to? What do you care about? Does it all matter, or is this all coming to an end?
No, I mean, I'm not on a fiat standard like UQ, so I don't have to worry about those fiat things. I'm always trying
push that. Your retirement's on a fiat standard, my man.
That's true. That's true. I'm trying to get out of that position, but I guess that's my safe haven. I'm not selling the Bitcoin there, or not selling my Bitcoin to keep myself afloat. I'd sink that first. No, but I mean, to your point, like I think P hit the nail on the head, that like they're going to invent new ways to inject money into the economy, whether that's UBI, whether that is the U.S. government's talking about creating like a central bank digital currency. I don't think that happens tomorrow. I don't think that even happens next year, but they said their goals for looking into it were 2024. So I'd say in the next 4 years, I'd expect to get something. Obviously, China has their own version of it. But yeah, the central banks are looking to usurp, doing this whole weird like bond trading scheme of like buying back treasuries. They just want to get the money of the people to pump up the economy. And they think that giving them and restricting capital will be a way to both boost stocks, to boost companies, to quote unquote, like keep people in survival mode. But that's just my 2 cents.
You know what would pump up the economy? Not our economy, but if the Central African Republic bought Bitcoin today, I think the internet would just like break.
I think that would be funny if they were to do that. Or I think even like another big central bank. I know Mexico's had talks about getting into Bitcoin. Imagine Mexico's just like, yep, we're we're printing our own currency and we're going to the moon with this. I think when central banks kind of look at it, like if all assets are crashing right now, if you're buying the best, most pristine one, it's kind of a race to the hills. I mean, obviously there's a lot of people that think other assets are better, whether it's real estate, whether it's gold, which we don't have to talk about, or just like any other asset. Obviously we're watching stocks crumble, but a lot of times even people bring up that like they're way overvalued. They're still way overvalued and things have crashed. So like, what's that say about what they're worth?
I think too, there is just this ongoing, I think, discussion or idea that, actually, let me rephrase. I think it's very interesting that the timing of Central African Republic and Panama announcing sort of Bitcoin policies, but nothing to do with Bitcoin on their reserves or Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And I think that is a whole other can of worms that can be introduced even beyond just a country. Like right now is an opportunity for any country in the S&P 500 to turn around and take cash on their reserve and now hold some Bitcoin on their balance sheet all of a sudden. And I'm curious, Alex, like you kind of bring it up from the geopolitical lens, but do any of you guys think either a company or a country would have more weight if they were to turn around during this market downturn right now and say, we're going to adopt Bitcoin onto our balance sheet?
I guess I would ask you to define first what's the difference between a country and a really large company. No, I think a state would have probably have more power to maybe like turn the market or the sentiment around Bitcoin around a little bit. But yeah, I think it's going to be the actions of, the US government probably. I don't think any one company at this point putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet would be
You don't think though that like you brought up a very excellent point, although you were joking, of like what's the difference between a large company and like a country like Central African Republic? And let's be real, if Amazon were to turn around and say, we have Bitcoin on the balance sheet, we've incorporated Jack Mallers' Strike Lightning payments so that you can pay with over the Lightning Network to us when you buy Amazon anything, like would that not be a bigger signal and a bigger push forward for Bitcoin than, and I mean this in the most respectful way, the Central African Republic adopting Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think that would like potentially make bigger news in the English kind of speaking communities, but I don't know what it would do to price. It'll be interesting when Amazon inevitably one day has to buy Bitcoin. I guess we will see.
You're looking sultry over there.
As a reminder, you can come.
Pause.
Echo.
Anyone want or listening in on Twitter, you can come pop over to the YouTube link that is pinned to the very top, and you can see P's sultry face. But I'm curious your thoughts on company, country, and where you fall in that dynamic.
Can you repeat the question? Because I do have thoughts, but I want to make sure I'm answering it specifically.
Essentially, what would have more of an impact to the Bitcoin ecosystem at large? A company of the ilk like Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, company of real name value recognition versus another just random country adopting Bitcoin, specifically though, to hold it on their balance sheet?
I definitely think it's the company. I think that, but it would have, I mean, if you're asking what would be more significant, a random country or a very large company like Amazon, definitely going to be the very large company. But so much of this is psychology, right? Like last year, the strike announcement was huge because it was the first country announcing Bitcoin as legal standard, right? El Salvador. And that was a massive psychological kind of like item. People were super bullish. Interestingly, the price then tanked. But this year, I would argue that the strike announcement was way more significant from a technical and hyper Bitcoinization perspective. But the psychology of the moment was such that people reacted less strongly. I was very surprised that people were not like, holy shit. But it just felt, I guess, to some people more pedestrian than El Salvador adopting Bitcoin. I say this only as the way that people perceive these types of announcements is often surprising and very, very difficult to predict. But I will say, I think that it would take a medium-sized country to announce Bitcoin as legal tender, or a surprising and large company to announce Bitcoin as legal tender, before people really reacted in a super extreme way. I just think people are desensitized.
Chris, you get the last word on this topic.
I've got one more after Chris.
All right. Yeah, no, I think if it's a small country, like what's more important, a small country adopting it, or if Apple's like, yeah, we just lumped 20 billion into Bitcoin. Obviously, I think there's more sentiment behind Apple being at least the largest company on the US stock exchange. It's pretty close globally, but yeah, the largest publicly traded company putting it on its balance sheet. I think if that were to happen, it would change the sentiment for boomers. And what I mean by that is, like, let's just say Apple does that. Well, obviously, one of their largest shareholders is Berkshire Hathaway and Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett. I think that they wouldn't be too pleased with that occurring. But I think other boomers or people of the older generations would be like, wait a sec, this company that is a large part of my portfolio or something like that, like maybe there's something behind this Bitcoin. I think it opens up more eyes. I think a couple of the people on the board would not be thrilled, but like I said, that's their own opinion. But if the company decides to do it, it would be interesting.
Yeah, I think, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think we're going to see most, if not all countries eventually start to use Bitcoin, to learn about it, to adopt it. But I think there's diminishing returns in terms of the market price kind of reflection to that news. I'm more interested to see in the future Bitcoiners adopting countries and becoming, sovereign individuals, and really, making these nation states basically irrelevant, obsolete. You know what I mean? This democracy, quote unquote, has really overstayed its time. And I think we're going to see some creative solutions in the way of like extremely wealthy and well-resourced individuals who are living on a Bitcoin standard, just kind of make a new way of living and being a, global citizen, or whatever you want to call it.
Let's fucking go.
Any final thoughts, or should we do maybe one last stack some stats and do a smash buy?
Let's do it.
Cool. Thank you, P, for actually responding. But as a reminder, the price of Bitcoin has now gone up all the way to $31,000 a coin.
Yeah, it's because of our earlier smash buy.
Exactly. All right. I'm doing another hundo, because why the fuck not?
Q flexing. Q out here flexing on everybody.
I'm on a mission right
He's
now.
got $200 today.
Hey, man. Let me stack in peace.
I love it. Oh, we should remind people, because I don't think we've even mentioned the Bitcoin 2023 conference. Can they get tickets somewhere? If you can't get tickets, get ready to wait to get tickets. You should be trying to resource some tickets for Bitcoin 2023, regardless of price. We'll be there, and it's going to be fucking epic. So make sure you're ready to get those early bird tickets.
People love to be like, oh my God, the tickets are so expensive. And the reality is, if you have a lower time preference, you can get those extremely cheap tickets right now. Do it.
Just do it. Like, everyone, you were so pissed off about the price of tickets closer to the event. The ticket prices will never be this cheap. So just do it. Go buy the tickets. Come hang out with us. Everything is TBD. All I will say is we will be announcing everything, when the actual dates of the conference are, where it's going to be, and maybe a couple of speakers in June. So just be patient with us. Prices will be going up before that announcement happens. So just do it. I know you buy your Coachella ticket without a lineup. You can buy this ticket without knowing location, date, and lineup. Come on.
You could be a Leviathan among the whales too if you buy a bunch of tickets. That secondary market's going to be booming in a couple months.
Yeah, I just want to say, oops, I muted myself. I'm going to be leaking some alpha here. I've been advocating very strongly for Bitcoin 2023 taking place in the lost city of Atlantis. I'm doing what I can, either that or the bottom of the Mariana Trench.
Wait, did you find Atlantis?
Look, I have not.
Wait. Have we not talked to Nolan about Atlantis yet? Okay, good. We found Atlantis, so we could definitely host it there.
That's all I got.
All right, we've officially lost the plot, everyone. But buy your conference tickets for Bitcoin 23. It is going to be the biggest, baddest Bitcoin event of the world. And maybe I'll tease this much, but like if you're inept at like how to spend your Bitcoin, I'd highly recommend you go buy your Bitcoin tickets like right now. That's it. That's my only hint I'll give you. But if you also want to get some swag, Bitcoin 22 related, you want to get a new issue of the Moon Mag, anything from our Bitcoin magazine store is currently available. And if you use promo code FOMO, FOMO, you will get 10% off. And our whole squad here gets like a gold star or something. I don't know, but we keep our jobs if you do it. So make sure you use FOMO every time you check out.
I included a link for the tickets in the Nest on Twitter Spaces. So that's the spot where you can get your tickets, your pre-order tickets, at the cheapest rate they'll ever be. And Q, Alex P, anything else before we send it off?
Stay humble and stack sats.
Nah, fuck that. I'm never humble. I will hoist myself by my own petard every time.